the San Mateo County Harbor District Board of Commissioners. Tonight, it's October 18th at 6:30. It is now 6:30 exactly, and if we can have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Here.
Commissioner Brennan? Here. Commissioner Chancarelli?
President?
Commissioner Rennes?
Here.
President Mateusz?
Here.
Can I ask to clarify if you have an agenda posted to the door and that your door is
Yes.
open for the public?
We have an agenda posted in the hotel lobby. We have an agenda posted on the door. And we have a spare agenda here in the room.
Are there any members of the public there?
Yes, there are.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. So at this time, I'm going to take public comment for items that are not on the agenda. James Lee Hahn, I'm assuming that's for public comment number 1.
Yes,
right?
that's correct.
Great.
Good evening to the commission. I had some initial comments for President Mateusz, but in light of the microphone stand, I think I will modify them. At a previous meeting, I mentioned my concern over the fact that Commissioner Chancarelli was allowed to attend a meeting by teleconference, and this seems really disrespectful to the public. I think I'm embarrassed by the fact that there's a microphone stand in front of you guys right now, and that a microphone stand will be voting on motions tonight. I think if members of the public and people who have, stakeholders who have items on the agenda are making the effort to be here tonight to hear what you have to say and how you're going to vote, folks should be here. Folks who are elected to be here should be here if they want to have a say and want to have a vote. I'm fine with President Mateusz listening in, but I find it highly suspect that this is being used as a way to get him to vote on motions at this meeting, just as Commissioner Chancarelli did at the special meeting recently. This is highly irregular, and President Mateusz, if you can hear me, I'm not sure if you can, but I find this whole act really disappointing. I would remind you that myself and other people in this room advocated for you twice in 2 of your election campaigns, and we're highly disappointed that this is the way you see fit to run public meetings. And I hope, I know you have a lot of impatience with long meetings, that when meetings run until 10 to 11 p.m. that you have trouble staying in one spot and paying attention. So I question how well you'll be able to pay attention over a phone line. So I hope this is the way this meeting is going to go, and I hope you guys fix this before this meeting goes on. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other public comment before we move on to commissioner comments? Okay.
I believe there's a member of the public here in Portland that would like to make a comment.
Great, thank you, Tom.
Identify your name.
Yeah, hi. My name is Doug Laughlin. Can you folks hear me?
Yes, Doug, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for hearing me. I'm a resident of Moss Beach. I've been a harbor user for over 50 years, and I am also a sport fisherman and a member of the Coastside Fishing Club. I would like to speak to the importance of having access to the ocean resources from our own boat ramp. At Toll Point Harbor, it's been a very difficult year for us during the salmon season. I feel that I'm not really sure of the efforts being done, but it seems whatever they are, they're inadequate. And I would like to stress that the ramps, the boat launching ramps, should be a #1 priority to the harbor. I have to imagine that you guys are losing a lot of money from people who potentially would have come down to our harbor to launch their boats and use our facilities and spend their money. We have 6 ramps, and we've had basically 2 to be used during a very big and successful salmon season. And in a short time, you'll be looking at a Saturday morning crab opener for the recreational fishery, which will probably, I haven't seen the tides yet, but you better pray they're high tides and we can maybe use a 3rd ramp. But you're going to have some people that are going to bypass Pillar Point and go elsewhere to launch their boats for crab season. And that's not just going to be the opener. They're going to stay away for good. There's already among our membership a lot of complaining on the website about what's happening. And so anyway, I think you guys need to develop a strategy, or a better strategy if you have one now, to deal with the sanding in of the ramps, as well as whatever long-term plan for dredging the harbor you guys are working on. This year it's been like
3 minutes.
trying to launch a boat at the old ramp, which is right across from the harbor master's office. It was a 2-lane ramp, and it was horrendous to try to launch your boat when there was a crowd there, and we're basically back to that right now. So I think an improvement is long overdue.
Doug,
Yes,
actually, there's a 3-minute time limit, and you just hit the 3 minutes. So thanks for your public comment. Yeah.
Can I just add 30 seconds to that?
Well,
So I'd like to just add a 30-second comment.
Well,
I was down at the ramps a couple weeks ago. Leland Parsons was tearing
Is this
apart
the
some
same
boats,
person?
and he had a excavator from Andrini there, and I said, Leland, take a few scoops of sand out. And he looked at me and he goes, I wish I could. It's as simple as that, you guys. Just take some sand out of there.
Doug, it's not that
Thank
simple,
you.
and this is Commissioner Lorenis. Please come to our sand replenishment meeting where we will have more detailed discussion on this. It'll be posted, and it should be the second Tuesday of next month.
great. Thanks,
I'll be in
Doug.
line. I will be in line trying to launch my boat. Sorry.
Thank you.
Can I ask him for the spelling of his last name?
Yeah, Doug, would you please confirm the spelling of your last name?
Sure. It's Laughlin.
I have that here. Okay. Great, thank you. Tom?
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any more members of the public who wish to speak, Tom?
Not at the present time. A couple more said they were going to show up. If they do, I'll try and find a way to announce them.
Thank you. Okay, so next, Commissioner comments for item 2. Robert?
Yes, I have a few comments. So throughout this meeting, I'm going to bring up several topics as part of this meeting. One is public process. I think that it's very important to keep in mind that the work we're doing needs to be a public process. Number 2, it needs to be fair and inclusive, and I'll bring these words up as part of my comments on some of these issues. I'd like you to look for them. And I'd like to point out also that while I'm talking about these things, my intention is not to make assertions of people's intentions, just so you know. Okay.
Could we do something about, there's a lot of feedback coming from this, and I find that really distracting. Is there a way we can turn down the volume on this feedback?
Yeah, it is.
This
loud.
is
I
really,
just
Down the volume.
it's
Hard to
disruptive.
understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
You hearing us okay, Tom?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sabrina, are you done, Ed?
Yeah.
Okay, Sabrina?
Yeah, I have a few comments. So it would be nice if we had our meeting mic'd here like we do at the other locations, so if we could get the microphones going forward, because I know it can be hard to hear in the back. So that would be great if we could do that at the next meeting. My next comment is, I wanted to mention that if you look at our bills and claims this month, you'll see that we have over $46,000 in legal fees from Hanson Bridget, and that is only for the month of August. We really need to get control of the situation. Our legal fees are running wild, and we are pouring money into attorney's fees that we could be using on actual projects that benefit the public. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. Secondly, I wanted to mention that we have a hazardous fuel system at Oyster Point Marina, which needs to be replaced. And that includes the pumps, all of the lines, and the tanks as well. This is a very hazardous situation, and in light of the fires that are going on around California right now, I think we need to focus on this and get this hazardous situation taken care of ASAP. I'm extremely uncomfortable with it, so I wanted to communicate that again. And then also mention that I support going back to 2 meetings a month. This 1 meeting a month situation is not working out for many reasons, which I will be talking about again. Lastly, I wanted to mention that it appears that there has been a leak of attorney-client privilege confidential information, and I have brought that to the attention of the board via an email that I sent this evening. All the commissioners have a copy of it. There's a copy on that table for the public if you'd like to read it. Commissioner Mateusz has it if he checks his email, so we all have it. And essentially, information was leaked to Barbara Wood, who is a staff writer for the Almanac, regarding an article that she was writing specifically about Commissioner Chang Karali serving potentially incompatible offices on the Fire District in Menlo Park and the Harbor District Board of Commissioners. So if you're interested in the email, I've asked to have it attached to the minutes. So that would be in our next board packet. You would see the email attached, and if anybody wants to read it, I'm happy to email it to you. You can reach me on my cell phone. That's 415-816-6111. Thanks.
Great. Tom, do you have any comments?
Yes, I do. Past comments at various board meetings have alluded commissioners don't all read their board packets. This one's surely not an excuse, but to read every one of this one was a task. I'm a little bit dismayed by the time exerted by some meetings with the discussions that seemed to go nowhere. If commissioners were concise and to the point, there is far less likelihood we would run out of time for things like commissioner comments. And then in addition, I'd like perhaps John Wren or someone to comment on repairs to the Oyster Point fuel dock. That concludes my comments.
Great, thank you. I just have one quick comment. Basically, I went to the Fish and Fleet event, which was great, and I saw our Harbor District staff there, and they were very friendly and helpful, and our booth was pretty popular, so it was good to see. I also attended the CSDA conference in Monterey, and I want to ask Steve Miller in particular about this item because I was at a breakout session on design immunity, or I think they called it also facilities defense, and basically it was a presentation on, I guess, infrastructure of a special district or any government agency and what the agency's liabilities would be. I think one of the examples that was used was the Golden Gate district, and how the Golden Gate was designed for a specific purpose, and it might have been used for suicides and whatever. But given that we have facilities that are being constructed, I was just wondering if it made sense for us to have that presentation, which I thought was very interesting and very useful. And your firm did it. That's why I'm looking at you.
So you and I have spoken about this. I'm glad you found the presentation helpful. If it is the wish of the board, my partner Kim Manolius would be more than happy to come and make that presentation to you whenever you would like, and at the however it can be best scheduled.
This
Easily
is
accomplished.
Commissioner comments.
Yes, it is.
Not legal counsel.
This is my comment.
Yeah,
So
but
anyway, I just wanted to make that comment to you and the board because I thought it was a very interesting presentation. So I'm just putting it out there. If we're done with commissioner comments, then we can move on to item B, which is the consent calendar. Is there does anyone want to pull off items?
I would like to pull 2, 4, and 5, please.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'd like to pull 3.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve items 1, 6, and 7 of the consent calendar?
So moved.
Actually, I'd like to pull 1 as well. I missed 1.
Okay. Then it's items 6 and 7. You want to amend your
Yes,
motion?
so moved for 6 and 7, please.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor? Oh, we have to do roll call. Yeah. sorry.
President Matoush? On 6 and 7?
Yeah, approved.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Yes.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Okay, so that motion passes unanimously. So we'll save the consent items for the end of the meeting that have been pulled off.
And I'd like to make sure that none of these consent items are disappearing off this agenda if we don't get to them. They need to roll over to the next meeting. So I just want to make that clear that we can't have things just disappearing because we don't finish our packet.
Thank you, okay, so, item 8, Pillar Point Harbor Fishing Pier Access Walkway and Adjacent Breakwater Repair Project. John, I believe this is you?
Yes, this is a motion to authorize the general manager to execute a work directive in accordance with the previously board-approved 2016 professional services agreement with Moffett and Nickel for an amount not to exceed $82,600 for design, engineering, regulatory compliance, and construction management for repairs to the Pillar Point Harbor Fishing Pier, adjacent access walkway, and protected breakwater, and to establish a contract contingency in the amount of 10% of the contract amount for unanticipated additional expenses associated with the contract, and authorize the general manager to issue change orders up to the contingency amount. The existing fishing pier is almost 30 years old and provides fishing activities to the non-boating public. It is a vital component of the Pillar Point Harbor. The fishing pier facility was constructed in 1989 over and adjacent to an existing riprap breakwater. The fishing pier consists of a concrete pile, timber pier structure, an access walkway structure serving the pier from shore, and the original supporting riprap breakwater. The breakwater extends beyond the fishing pier location to provide protection for the Pillar Point Harbor, inner harbor. Due to ongoing timber deterioration and breakwater erosion failure, a 2012 condition survey conducted by GHD Inc. found it to require substantial repairs. The proposed agreement with Moffett and Nickel will include design, engineering, technical specifications, regulatory compliance, overall project management, investigation of funding assistance opportunities, and coordination with the district throughout the project. The project management and construction support will include work to support the district during the construction phase. This may include attending pre-construction meetings, responding to RFIs, assisting the district on change orders, providing on-site inspections during construction to ascertain whether the contractor is completing the work in general conformance with plans and specifications, assisting with quality control of construction materials and workmanship, and performing a final inspection and providing a punch list of items for final acceptance. Staff recommends the board authorize the general manager to execute a work directive in accordance with the previously board-approved 2016 professional services agreement with Moffett Nickel for an amount not to exceed $82,000.
Okay, I'll open it up for discussion. You have any comments, guys?
I have a question.
Okay.
So this is 82,000 for management and design, and then there's a $500,000 budget that's been allocated. And so does the 82,600, does that fall under that budget, or is that separate?
Yes, that's included in that budget.
Okay. Yeah, great, thanks.
Sabrina?
Yeah, so generally, I support doing projects at Pillar Point Harbor. I do not support doing projects, CIP projects at Oyster Point Marina, because we don't own the facility, and it makes sense to me that we would want to improve our facilities at Pillar Point Harbor where we actually do own the facility. One thing that concerns me about fishing in this location is water quality. And I'm wondering if we've done any water quality testing to see if it's safe to fish. I know that the beach that's right next to this pier is often closed almost year-round with warning signs about hazardous conditions related to water quality. So how sure are we that we should be allowing people to fish in polluted water?
With the, since obviously we're not a bay facility, we've got, we are within an inner breakwater. However, the fishing pier is on the outside of the inner breakwater, so it's even more exposed to direct ocean waters. We are, as I'm sure the board is aware, and hopefully the public is as well, we have entered into an agreement with RCD, Resource Conservation District, who are investigating and continuing to try to identify any sources of pollution that are entering the harbor from the shore. I've not been made aware that there's any dangers of eating fish, from within the harbor.
Has it been, I'm looking at Ed because he knows a lot about water quality testing in that area, and it's right next to the beach at Barbara's Fish Trap, which is closed almost year-round due to water pollution. So I think it's a legitimate question, and how does the science?
Well, I think that's a question. So that area there is consistently contaminated with bacterial pollution, and the sources are not completely identified, but they're called indicator bacteria, and they indicate the possibility of contaminants that could affect humans. So I think the question would be, I guess the best place to ask that question is of County Environmental Health, because they post signs on the beach, but it's not clear from the signs whether they mean the beach, the water, the runoff. But it's a legitimate question, and we can ask County Environmental Health that question.
Yeah, I could do more research, Commissioner Brennan. It's just been my experience from marinas around the world and fishing that even though there are fecal indicator bacteria within waters that, or even other pollutants that could be dangerous to someone swimming or directly ingesting, that differs from the filtrations, that go through, that a fish would, a fish would absorb. There are heavy metals and this kind of thing, mercury and that kind of thing that are potentially something that would absorb into a fish and then be dangerous to human with consuming that fish. But the county has not issued any sort of declaration that our waters are not safe to eat fish out of.
Are they testing, I know they test like clams and mussels and things like that, but are they testing the seafood in that location?
I think it's a legitimate question, as Ed said as well, and I think I will look into that as we progress with the, no matter what, I think we are very aggressively moving forward as, and we're going to have, in January, we're going to have another update from RCD. But the district is aggressively trying to identify all sources of contaminants that are going into our harbor waters. So I would hope that we will even have these issues resolved prior to our fishing pier being rebuilt.
Okay, so I think that piers are beneficial to more than just fishermen, so that's not the whole extent of my concern about this. I think that the pier has public benefit for everyone, and it's used frequently, so, in general, I'm in support of this, but I do think that we need to get some clarity on that so we can be sure that we're notifying people if there are problems with the pollution in relation to the quality of the seafood.
Okay, Robert?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the general manager
Wait,
to.
hold on, because I want
Sorry.
to see if Tom has
Oh,
any.
sorry.
Tom, do you have any comments?
No, I'm good right now.
Okay, sorry, Robert.
Can I make my motion?
Yes,
Thank you.
I just
I'd
wanted
like to
to
make a motion to authorize the general manager to execute a work directive with Moffett and Nickel for an amount not to exceed $82,600 plus a 10% contingency for design, engineering, regulatory compliance, and construction management for repairs to the Phillip Point Harbor Fishing Pier, adjacent access walkway, and breakwater.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, then we'll take the vote.
Commissioner Brennan,
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz,
Aye.
President Matoush,
Aye.
Commissioner Chancarelli,
Aye,
Commissioner Bernardo.
Aye.
motion passes unanimously. Thanks. Moving on to item 9, Phillip Point Harbor, Oyster Point Marina Electrical Improvement Project, competitive bid acceptance. John, I think this is yours as well.
Yeah, this is a motion to authorize the general manager to find the bid from Atlas Pellizzari Electric, Inc. to be responsive and responsible. Accept the bid amount of $487,000 and subject to continued due diligence, award the contract to Atlas Pellizzari Electric, Inc. and authorize the general manager or his designee to negotiate with Atlas Pellizzari Electric, Inc. on schedule, means, and methods, and value engineering to determine opportunities for deductive change orders and establish a contract contingency in the amount of 10% of the negotiated contract amount for unanticipated additional expenses associated with the contract, and authorize the general manager to issue change orders up to the contingency amount. In 2013, the district entered into an agreement with electrical contractor E. Bacon, Inc. to conduct an electrical condition assessment at Phillip Point Harbor and Oyster Point Marina. This assessment concluded that the transformers on docks A, B, and C at Phillip Point Harbor and docks 1 through 6 at Oyster Point Marina were in need of replacement. Minor repairs were conducted, but this project was never put to competitive bid. The transformers continue to age and are now in need of replacement. The electric transformers are a vital part of providing electric services to the docks. They transform higher voltage to the required voltage needed for vessels. Moffett and Nickel Consultants submitted design, engineering, and technical specifications for bid on January 1, 2017. On August 11th, bids were opened. Atlas Pellizzari, Inc. was the sole qualified bidder. Atlas Pellizzari Electric, Inc. demonstrated that they are a responsive and responsible bidder. Staff have already requested further bid financial breakdown and discussed possible method alternatives to cut costs through deductive change orders with Atlas Pellizzari, and they have agreed to do so. Staff recommends the board authorize the general manager to find the bid from Atlas Pellizzari Electric, Inc. to be responsive and responsible, accept the bid amount of $487,000, and subject to due diligence, award the contract to Atlas Pellizzari Electric, Inc.
Okay, I'll open it up for commissioner discussion.
I have a question on
Sure.
the staff report. So, in the staff report, it does not, at least I'm not seeing it, maybe it's in here somewhere, it doesn't itemize out the cost per location. Am I missing that?
When we did the bid specs,
Yeah,
we did not, we bid it all as one project. We did not separate Oyster Point Marina from Phillip Point Harbor. So, no, in their bid form, on their bid form, it was just for the entire project.
Well, I think in the future, we need to do that, because otherwise there's no way for the district to track how much we're spending on each facility. So that would be an easy thing. In fact, they could do that now. I mean, not the second, but we could go back to them and say, could you give us an itemized estimate or something that shows the breakout between the two locations? That's something that I would wanna know, so I hope I can get that information going forward.
Yes, yeah,
I think that's a good.
we would be doing that, you know, for our finance purposes, for our finance department purposes. We would be, you know, associating the costs to OPM and the costs to Pillar Point Harbor.
But why can't we get that information then now?
I could have provided it, I could have had them break it down for this actual bid acceptance. I just did not, because we did, for purposes of trying to keep costs as low as possible, we combined the two projects into one project, since they were obviously very similar. They're, you know, replacing transformers at both properties, both district properties.
Yeah, no, I understand that, to get you're bulking it together to get a hopefully better price, but still they ought to be able to show you the price
Yes, they definitely could.
per location, and then just say, the cost is based on the full project, not one or the other, you know, that's how I would do it if I was estimating it. So I think that information is key.
And in the staff report, I did break it down by percentages.
This is good. It's in the, it's in the, it's in the package, when the link documents.
What page do you want us to go to, John?
John, you included in your report a link to their bid form.
Page 9-74.
Okay, so it's for Pillar Point Harbor, it's 165,000, and for Oyster Point Marina, it's 322,000 for a total bid price of 487,000. I'm saying that so the public can hear what the breakout is, so we actually do have that information. It's a pretty lengthy document, so it's how many pages is this thing?
A lot.
It's 90
some odd
pages long, but if you look at page 74, it has the breakout of the costs. So that's helpful to have. Thanks for pointing that out. So I personally would be completely comfortable approving the amount for Pillar Point Harbor and support doing the project at Pillar Point Harbor. But I am opposed to spending money at Oyster Point Marina. And if we were going to spend money at Oyster Point Marina, I would certainly want to have some contribution from the city of South San Francisco and Oyster Point Development, or however that works out for them. And I think lacking that, there's just no way I'm gonna support to continue subsidizing Oyster Point Marina. So I feel really strongly about that, and I just wanna make sure the public understands where I'm coming from with that.
Yeah,
And you read my mind, I'm in complete agreement with that. I don't see why we should be supporting South San Francisco. We don't own the property, we're just there to manage it, so we're just throwing money away.
Well, again, I think that very similar to the fuel dock and to other amenities, restrooms, etc., since we have obligated ourselves to manage the property professionally through 2026, arguably we are receiving revenue and tax monies to maintain the property properly. I think replacing something and eliminating potential fire hazard and danger and continuing to provide the minimum electric to the berths would arguably be responsible.
I don't think that the tax revenue is for that facility. I think the tax revenue is for our facility that we own, which is Pillar Point Harbor. And I don't want to continue to subsidize a facility that is owned by the city. And when our agreement is up in less than 10 years, we don't keep anything there. All of that stays with the city. They benefit from all the CIP projects, all the money that we've poured into that facility. What we agreed to do was operate it to provide the staff and the management of the facility, which we're doing. And I'm not complaining about that. I think that's fine that we are managing and operating the facility. But I'm in complete disagreement that this district should pay for CIP projects such as restrooms and resurfacing parking lots and building new docks and doing electrical, any of this stuff. All of it, in my opinion, should be paid for by the agency that owns the facility. And I think I've said that many times in the past, so I think everybody pretty well knows my perspective on that at this point. So unfortunately, for that reason, I can't vote for this, but if this item was specifically for a project at Pillar Point Harbor, for a CIP project at Pillar Point Harbor, I'd be happy to vote in support of it.
Tom?
At the present time, San Mateo County Harbor District is charged with managing 2 harbors. I'm going to support this for both harbors because that is our charge at this point. I find it, I'm a little dismayed by the fact that this demonstrates immaculately that we have commissioners that do not read the board packet and did not see that this information was already provided for both harbors. But this is a classic example of getting a board packet and not paying attention to it. I'm going to support this project because at the present time, we have a CIP program, we have a management agreement, we have everything that says we have 2 harbors at this time. Everyone on this board was elected to manage 2 harbors at this point, and for that reason, I'm going to support this.
Thanks, Tom. Robert?
Yes, I am in complete philosophical agreement with President Mateusz. We do have an obligation to both harbors, not just one, because both harbors are used used and enjoyed by members of the public throughout the county. And we can't just have things fall in disrepair. We do have an obligation. So with that, I would like to make a motion to approve.
Here.
Sorry, lost my page. Authorize the general manager to award a contract to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Atlas Palizzari Electric Inc., in the amount of $487,000 and establish a contract contingency in the amount of 10% of the contract amount for unanticipated additional expenses associated with the contract and authorize the general manager to issue change orders up to the contingency amount.
So there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any more discussion?
I'd just like to say that I really don't appreciate Commissioner Mateusz's chastising tone, and I don't do that to him at board meetings, and I would appreciate it if he not do it to other board members. I think it's very unprofessional. Thank you.
Great. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye.
President Mateusz?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
No.
Commissioner Brennan?
No.
Okay, the motion carries 3-2. Item 10, records management and retention policy and procedure. Anita, thank you for this report and for all of the work you did with regard to our retention policy.
Good evening, Commissioners and members of the public. Anita Pyle, Director of Administrative Services. Actually, I would like to give credit to my staff, especially Lo Hodges, who's in the audience right now, who worked for the last 3 months trying to put this policy and procedure together. And in that regard, in addition to her, we also had our accounting staff giving input and what has happened, it's become a team project with lots of revisions. So today, for some requests from the commissioners, we also provided a chart that the public has that compares the current policy, which was actually since 1996, so it's 21 years old, so it was about time that we revised it. And it compares the retention schedules from the current policy policy to the proposed retention schedule so that we have an idea exactly what we did.
Well,
What-
there.
And this is what it looks like. There's some on the table there for the public, if you want to see. How we started off by doing this was that Lo and another member of our staff, I think Debbie, listened to a webinar to understand how to go about putting this kind of policy and procedure together. Then we found some policies, California Special District Association, CSDA, had some sample policies on there that were available to us. And then we also found 5 different policies from different agencies, Rancho Murieta Community Services District, East Contra Costa Fire Protection District, Ackerman Bay Fire Protection District, San Diego County Water Authority, and Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District. So Lo reviewed all 5 of those policies, and then she put together a retention schedule and then had all of our staff, for example, all of the items that were related to accounting and fiscal. She had our accounting manager and our accountant and other people look at those to make sure it was making sense as far as we were concerned. And then finally, the staff also consulted our attorneys to make sure that we were doing everything that was legally required and we were doing everything correct as far as what retention schedules should be like. And the policy looks at the purpose of a records retention and looks at it broadly and the guidelines and implementation process, while the procedure gets into the specific retention periods. So the chart will give you the comparison, and at this point, staff recommends that the commission adopt the revised records management and retention policy 2.1.4, providing staff with updated guidelines regarding the retention, disposal, and storage of records. And the motion would be to adopt resolution number 17-20 and the updated and restated records management and retention policy 2.1.4.
Great, I'll open it up to commissioner discussion. Robert?
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. This is like deja vu because where I work for a government agency as well, and we just updated our records management retention policy. And what's really interesting is, it's very similar. I look at your numbers in terms of minimum retention periods, and it's almost identical because these are pretty standard across public agencies. And the whole goal is, again, to really, my understanding is not to treat all documents the same way, because an HR hiring document is not the same as, say, a ground lease document. Okay, they're very different and the times are different. So what I'm trying to say, in a nutshell, succinctly, is I will support this. Thank you.
Okay. Sabrina? Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I'm the commissioner who asked to have the comparison of the current retention schedule opposed to the proposed retention schedule, because in the past when we've discussed this, and it has been a very hot topic, there's a number of newspaper articles written about the last time we tried to change our retention policy. It was very critical that we be able to see a comparison, and I was surprised that we didn't get that this time, but I'm really happy that staff has provided it. However, I just am seeing it for the very first time right now, and there's no way for me to evaluate this information and to make any sort of informed decision based on what's been put in front of me tonight. This is a very lengthy document. These are significant changes. There are things here that we had retention for 50 years, which are now going down to 1 year. So these are things that I really need time to think about, and I think the public needs time to think about, and I'm not sure if the public has even seen the document that we just got here a moment ago. I think when it comes to litigation and district finances, there are documents that we might want to hold on to for more than a year or two. So I just don't want to move too quickly on agreeing to something that I know the staff has put a lot of energy into, and I really appreciate that. And I'm sure that you guys did evaluate other policies, but we haven't been provided with anything to compare this to. There were no examples of retention policies from other agencies, and if I had something like that to use as a comparison, that would certainly be helpful. So I'd feel more comfortable having this brought back to another meeting where we've had time to evaluate this compared to other agencies and make an informed decision. I'm just, some of the things I'm seeing here, like budgets, for example, permanent was our current retention. Budgets current is permanent. And we would be switching to 3 years. So, you know, that worries me because I think things like budgets are important when you look back at the history of the district and you're trying to get a sense of what went on with the district over time. If you don't have that information, you're missing some critical benchmarks. There are many other examples here, but again, I haven't really had time to go through this, but I see a lot of things that were 7 years that are now down to 1 year. What else? 50 years to 1 year, 50 years to 3 year, 12 years to 7 years. You know, the list goes on. So it's in general 12 years, 12 years to 5 years. It's just, it makes me very uncomfortable to have to decide on something that I've just been presented with. I can't support this at this time. I'd like a little more time to evaluate it. I think it's an important decision for the district. And I haven't, we were also just given this revised attached, what is this, policy? Revised attached policy, I haven't read this. So, I mean, I'm not into rubber stamping. That's not my thing. So I'm not comfortable with rubber stamping this. I think I need more time to review it. Thank you.
Ed?
I think this is a great start. It's a lot of work, I realize. And like Sabrina, I'd actually like to sit down with you folks and discuss some of these things. Just as an example, the budget, when, where does it go? Let me look at the number again.
And we've got canceled checks, 10 years to 3 years. Given some of the past problems with checks here, I think that might not be such a great idea, so I need more time. Sorry to interrupt.
That's
Ed,
okay.
it's your
I need
turn.
to find the numbers. Yeah, so it was audit plus 3 years. I'm not quite sure what that means, but with budgets, and do you have audits? The audit data is up here, so that's permanent. Going to audit plus 5 years. You know, it would be good to see, and maybe you already did this, but see, I don't know whether you did or not, is talk to the folks that did our audit and get a feel for what they think is the right standard. If I have questions like that, I'd like to just sit and talk to you guys rather than just say, yeah, sure, this is great.
Tom?
Yes, this is posted to the public website on October 13th. This is October 18th, so it's been posted publicly for 5 days. The commissioners have the method to get their board packets early. I'm surprised some folks have not had time to take a look at and digest this. I'd like to move ahead and not defer things that can be solved quickly. So I'm going to be in favor of adopting this immediately.
And I'd just like to, you go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So Tom, maybe you didn't, does Tom have these?
No.
So there's additions to this, Tom.
No? Tom, you have.
We've got a spreadsheet, which is actually really great. And then we also have a revised attachment, which I've not read.
The revised attachment, actually, just so you know, there's nothing changed in there except two items were repeated, so they were deleted, that's all.
Oh,
There's nothing, everything stayed the same in the revised.
Okay.
So there's nothing
it
changed.
doesn't say that
And
here,
the
it just
chart-
says revised.
The chart I was asked just to do on Monday, and it just took longer than I thought.
Yeah.
I had promised that it would be done by this afternoon, and we wanted to make sure
Yeah.
every item.
Well, I
was-
think it's great, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, so to clarify, Tom, we only got this information right now. So this has not been in our board packet. So your insinuation that we've had since last Friday to review it is completely inaccurate.
So I do have a public comment from James Lee Hahn on this item. Thanks, Mr. Hahn.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate the fact that on your last agenda item, you had a tiebreaker vote by a microphone. This entire meeting is running afoul of being actually completely illegitimate. Anyway, back to the item. I noticed on here that board meeting video recordings, which we have PCTV doing for us wonderfully every meeting, now their retention is not even semi-permanent. It's 1 year after the approval of minutes. I'd like to point out that this is, again, going back to something Commissioner Lorenz referred to at the beginning of the meeting. I don't pretend to know staff's intentions, but the result of this policy is to decrease the transparency of the district. And in light of this district's history, this is a really bad move. You have a whole bunch of items on here where the retention is going down by years. Things that are important, like board meeting video. If you didn't have videos, you wouldn't be able to see, I don't know, Commissioner Bernardo making a snide face every time Commissioner Brennan is speaking. You wouldn't be able to see things like that. All you would see is a minute, the minute summary of what happened. You probably wouldn't have in the minutes that your board president was insulting members of the commission without even being here to see what was going on. This entire policy needs to be taken back to staff and reconsidered. You should not be voting on this. If you are voting on this, I hope you vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve McGraw, do you have any clarifications? I saw you writing things down. I just wanted to give you a chance.
No, I was merely circling some of the items on the spreadsheet that were addressed.
I have a couple comments, if I
Well,
could.
hold on, let me ask Steve if you have any clarifications that you
I
want.
don't think staff has got any objection at all to bringing this back. If it needs to marinate a little longer and be discussed, but it is pretty much, as our Director of Admin, Anita, said, a compilation of the best management practices from a number of other agencies.
Good, we'd love to see
Sabrina?
those. Yeah, I just realized this thing is double-sided, so I didn't even see half of it. Now I'm seeing financial statements. They're going from currently being permanent to 3 years. Then we've got liens, ledgers, payroll ledgers, 25 years to 3 years. We've got lien sales, 10 years, liens, permanent to 10 years. Litigation, permanent to 2 years. I'm definitely not comfortable with that. Logbooks, permanent to 5 years. I mean, it's just, it's so easy to scan things and to store them digitally. I can't imagine why we would want to get rid of any of these things that we don't need to get rid of. It makes me very, very uncomfortable. So yeah, I definitely need more time. This is shocking. And I just need more time to process this.
Okay. Any other comments? Robert?
I'd like to make a motion if there are no more comments.
Tom, do you have any other comments to make?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 17-20 and the updated and restated records management and retention policy 2.1.4.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any more discussion? I mean, I know this is pretty contentious, so I want to put it out there one more time.
Nope.
Okay, we'll take a roll call, please.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
No.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
No.
Commissioner Mateusz?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 3-2. Okay, moving on to item 11, Administrative Headquarters District-Owned Facility. Steve McGraw, it's your turn now.
Thank you, Vice President Chancarelli. This district has, despite other issues like selling property at one point, I'm not aware of too much of the history behind that. The post office was down the street. This district has taken a run on a number of occasions at developing permanent space, and has looked both coastside and on the bay. Preliminary research suggested that in 2005, we advertised for bid a new building across from the Harbor Master's office and rejected the bids. We looked at preparing tentative and final parcel maps in 2007 for a development of a site at Oyster Marina. We looked in 2009 at a couple of sites in Princeton. In 2011, there was a quite aggressive campaign of public meetings that had this district looking at sites on Perch Beach, adjacent to or replacement of the district maintenance building, in a couple of the different parking lots of Phillip Point Harbor, building a second floor on Tennant Row, and expanding the Harbor Master's office. At the same time, we looked at a vacant parcel and the Pier, and we also looked at developing a site on the post office lot. We owned it at that time. Going into 2012, after a number of meetings, certainly there was very clear opposition to the development of a location on Perch Beach. There was much discussion about the difficulties of establishing an administrative site at the lessee's building and whether that was in fact big enough. But after the process ran through, the district decided to move forward with plans for building on the B lot. The B lot is the lot immediately behind and above the lessee's buildings, what some euphemistically call Tennant Row. We got as far as retaining an architect to look at what that might look like on site. That is attached to this board package. The board approved the issuance of a request for proposals for architectural services, and to the best of our research, we've not been able to find that RFP for the development of this building there was ever issued. Moving on into 2015, we at one point considered purchasing this building. We ended up not purchasing this building. This building was sold out of foreclosure, and subsequent to that, we leased this floor, moving from lease space in South San Francisco, adjacent to Oyster Point Marina. Lease payments and moving out of lease space are seem to be long-held goals of the district. I think it's important to address this in light of the district's efforts at developing a strategic plan. And ideally, we do the strategic plan followed by a site-specific master plan for both Phillip Point and Oyster Point. The strategic plan may end up saying, for example, that the district vision is to own its own administrative office building on the coast side or in some other location. The master plan might then state that the goal is to develop a site above Tennant Row or in B lot or on Avenue Alhambra. The idea there is it's a succession of detail. Recognizing this, but also recognizing the district has had a number of false starts, and that projects have long lead times, and that we continue to pay in excess of $90,000 a year in rent, and that the lease will require renegotiation beginning in late 2020 or early 21, staff is recommending that this board consider providing direction to staff on next steps in this regard. First question, bay or coast side? And I think that on the bay, clearly if we were to want to develop a permanent office site there, it's not lost on anybody that our joint powers agreement only extends through 2026, and we wouldn't own the dirt, so staff does not recommend pursuing this option for permanent office space. That leaves the coast side. We were originally formed as a coastside entity, and until 1977 we only operated Phillip Point Harbor. We owned the real estate at Phillip Point, and we were the recipients of a state guidance grant in 1960. So staff is recommending that if we're to move forward on this, that the district focuses attention on the coast side. And just for examples purpose, staff has begun a preliminary review of 4 options. This building, although it's not currently actively for sale, the fire station just down the road, we know that that building will be vacant at some point. There is an empty parcel adjacent to Sam's Chowder House, or to revisit the 2012 program to build on the B lot in Phillip Point Harbor. Roughly speaking, these 4 projects divide into 2 categories. One, new construction, which leads to more design flexibility, but possibly taking more time, and 2 are existing buildings, one requiring no time, this building, and one requiring significant work, so both would somewhat limit design flexibility. There are, of course, always other options that may be currently available or will be available in the future. But for purposes of discussion, staff has limited this discussion to 4 above. Staff will continue to explore other options until such time the final decision has been made. If we look at this building, we've been renting approximately 3,400 square feet. We rent it for $91,200 annually, and by the time we get to the expiration of the final lease option that we have on this building, our rent will be $102,000 a year. In 2013, the owner was in default on a loan. The district started in the process of trying to buy it. I think was somewhat put off by a not very rosy property inspection. The building eventually sold at a foreclosure for, my understanding is approximately $1.3 million. The building has deferred maintenance, and the extent of that would only be revealed by very thorough property inspection. In the meantime, recognizing the fact that any project will take a significant amount of time, and the latest staff report we've been working on a plan for some basic improvements, especially to the meeting room, to staff, workflow, and workplace safety. Regardless of any action or direction from the board, staff will notify working there at the property management company of our intent to exercise the option to renew for 1 year. That current lease expires in May of 2018. The lease specifically says we cannot simultaneously exercise all 3 options. I'd like to, with each of the options, I also looked at what are the implications for the strategic plan, development of a strategic plan. This option, this building, has the least impact on Phillip Point Harbor, allowing more options in the development of the plan and any subsequent master plan. The fire station, saying here, in May of 2018, construction is expected to take 14 months, beginning, May of 2018 for the new fire station. Subsequent to the completion of the building, the existing fire station in El Granada will become available, and additionally the parcel on which the new station will be built is being subdivided, so a portion of the existing site will also be available to be developed. I've made clear that that's certainly an option to be considered. Staff did not try to bring to this board a discussion of every possible site within Princeton or El Granada, but is seeking mostly broad direction. The fire station building was constructed in the late 50s, has a building area of approximately 3,500 square feet on a site approaching a little over 1/4 of an acre. Building cost of renovation will be high, not designed for proposed use, and will need to be completely gutted. So the strategic plan implications for that site are pretty much the same as for 504 and Alhambra for this building, i.e. having the least impact on Phillip Point Harbor and subsequently the greatest flexibility in development of the strategic plan or the subsequent master plan. In revisiting the B lot at Phillip Point Harbor, the lot immediately above Tenant Road, attached to this staff report are the massing studies that were done at the time. This showed a ground floor that had 3,300 square feet of general assembly or meeting space, 2,000 square feet of office space, and another 2,700 square feet of office space were shown on the second floor. I'm not sure why the plans in this particular instance talked about ground and first floors as opposed to first and second. It's reminiscent of my upbringing in Britain, which is how we referred to it. Maybe the architect was English, I don't know. The square footage proposed, it would be sufficient for district needs. Certainly, if the board directs staff to investigate this option further, clearly one of the first things to do would be to review with stakeholders and public meetings what the options are there, and that may reveal other options too that could return to this commission for further discussion prior to any decisions, final decisions being made. This lot does have implications for any development of the strategic plan, should the strategic plan not be completed by that time, in as much as it would provide an additional constraint on the property currently owned and operated by the district. Parking could possibly also be an issue. However, staff also believes that through creative management and review of existing parking lots, we should be able to manage that impact sufficiently. Then the final option that I would bring to the commission this evening was an empty parcel adjacent to Sam's Chowder House. This is about 6/10 of an acre. It is currently for sale for $1 million. The zoning is suitable for district office and meeting community room. It's elevated above Highway 1, graded to slope towards the trail on the south side, allowing for the potential construction, should any occur, to have little impact on the view shed from the road. South side of the parcel terminates at the coastal trail just east of the boat launch at the northern edge of the district-owned parcel. With parking nearest to Highway 1, a single-story building that increases to 2-story at the south end nearest the trail would be sufficient to accommodate district uses, plus a meeting room and community space. Certainly any lower floor nearest the coastal trail could be susceptible to tsunami or sea level rise, and in a situation like this, where the building, where the lower floor would be primarily used for meeting space, it could easily be constructed to allow for tsunami damage to be of minimal impact by block construction, elevated electrical outlets, and breakaway doors. So from a strategic planning perspective, this site may offer the greatest flexibility in as much as it allows for the development of a building within the harbor, but not really of the harbor. Maybe I mean that backwards. It's of the harbor in that it's inside the outermost breakwater, but not within the core of the district property.
Which location are you talking about?
I'm talking about the empty parcel next to Sam's, if that was what we wanted to choose. So, if the commission wanted to pursue this option, staff would work to determine parking and other impacts, and use that information, as with any other choice that this, or direction that this commission takes, during the strategic planning process, prior to returning to the commission for further directions. Consequently, the decisions for the commission to consider: number one, is permanent ownership of district office space desired? If the answer to that is yes, the second question is, should this discussion wait for completion of the strategic plan and subsequent Phillip Point master plan? And if the answer to that is yes, then we will need to return to this board with direction on lease negotiations subsequent to the termination of the, or the end of the 3 lease options we've got. And if the answer to the last question, should this discussion wait for completion of the strategic plan, if the answer to that is no, could we accomplish occupancy by May 31st, 2021? Or would we still need to negotiate a new lease on this facility? So, if we're looking at completion of any project by 2021, if the board directs us to try to determine the availability of this building, clearly we should be able to wrap that up prior to the end of any leases. The fire station, possibly, and new construction, B lot, or the empty lot, possibly, but unlikely. So, again, the first and primary question was, is permanent ownership of district office space desired? The options above describe possible direction for this board? If the answer is yes. If the answer is no, then we'll be back to this board by June of 2020, looking for direction on lease negotiations so that we can continue to provide high service to the public. There are 4 options presented. There are others. There will always be others. As with buying a house, it may be that the day after you close escrow, the better perfect house shows up on the market. There's no way of managing that. We'll do due diligence with whatever direction the board gives us. Certainly stakeholder input and public input is a key to a part of this. But at this point, staff is looking for direction from this board, but that'll be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question about the staff report specifically, which I think might be helpful to the public. If, I don't know, do we have public comment on this?
Yeah, but I was gonna take comments from, or discussions first, but I don't care, we can take public comment first.
Yeah, let's take public comment first.
Okay. Lisa Ketchum? Thank you, Lisa.
I'm Lisa Ketchum, I'm on the Mid-Coast Community Council, but I'm speaking as an individual on this issue. I just find the empty lot next to Sam's very intriguing. I hope you will at least look at that further. Seems to have many possibilities. And also, just from the rough sketch in the staff report, the profile of the building, just to point out that the view from the coastal trail will be important. It probably not necessary to step that back, or to make sure that that's not too imposing there. But it looks like there's a lot he could do to work with that. Thanks.
Thanks. James Lehan?
Good evening. I just wanted to stress that whatever location is looked at, that you really consider the impacts of sea level rise, climate change, extreme weather events. I don't know if any of you have walked the Bluff Trail north of Pillar Point, but with all the heavy storms we've been getting, there's been a lot of change up there. That's going to be the case for any, and that's going to affect any property that you're looking at on the shoreline, I would think. That includes the Sam's location, that includes the Pillar Point location that was recommended. But mainly what I wanted to bring up was just a question why this is being brought up at all. Understandably, $90,000 a year is a lot of money, but when you guys moved to this office, that was seen as a huge victory because this was a huge drop in what you were paying before. You only got here 2 years ago, and as far as I understand, you're still getting situated. I see boxes back there with documents that still need to be properly imaged and stored. So I'm not quite sure why resources are being spent into looking for a new place after you've already found this one here. This makes a lot of sense. You have another agency that you're sharing this building with. You're kind of nominally within a community because there's a neighborhood next door. And you're also, probably the only thing that this place lacks is more engagement with the public surrounding you. But that could be done easily with signage. You could have more events here. You could do more to publicize the fact that you're here. Yeah, so I'm not really sure why this is being brought up. But if it is brought up, it should be under the strategic plan. It should not be done here. It should be done with a lot of public input. I know that before the district moved here, there was a lot of public comments, a lot of comments from board members about how you need to find a space. And I think everyone, including the community, thought it was a great victory that you're here. I don't really see a whole lot of people asking or coming up to the mic and saying, you need to own your own building. Why haven't you looked at that lot out there? So yeah, and I noticed in the next agenda item, I saw a line about how in the lease there's a contractual option for a 3-year extension. I would consider looking into that and maybe seeing in your lease negotiations if you can't argue for some better conditions on the rent instead of an increase every year. Apparently there's no rent control for public agencies either. But I would think that if you maybe guarantee that you will be here for the next several years, that maybe conditions of the lease might be alterable. Thanks.
Thanks. And I have an email from Dan Haggerty. I just wanted to read this. I don't know if members of the public have seen it, and I know that the Board of Commissioners has it. But his comment for item 11 is that he would like any discussion of permanent district-owned headquarters should be included with extensive public participation I am very interested in initial plans or ideas. So those are the only things I've got right now, so I'll open it up to commissioner discussion.
So I had a question about the staff report. That there was mention of tsunami inundation. Did you mention sea level rise also?
No, it's not.
Okay, well, most of us that live here on the coast side know that the tsunami inundation zone matches up with the sea level rise inundation zone. They match perfectly. So if something is in the tsunami inundation zone, then it is also in the sea level rise inundation zone. And of course, all of that is subject to change, and it doesn't get better. The news only gets worse. So the thing to think about here is you've mentioned that I think you mentioned tsunami around Lot B, correct?
I didn't actually, I mostly referred to that at the new construction at Sam's Lot, but the same would apply.
Okay, so I wanted to point out that the only, of all four of these options that you've included, and I'm gonna add a fifth option, which is the post office lot that the district sold. Commissioner Bernardo voted for that, to the fire district, that we could potentially repurchase part of it. All of the locations, including the post office lot, so that would be the old fire station that's down the street around the corner in El Granada, the empty parcel adjacent to Sam's Chowder House, which Lisa Ketchum commented on, and I've also gotten other comments from the public who strongly oppose that location because of concerns about view corridor and what have you. And then also the B lot, which is within the harbor behind the concessionaire's building, and then of course the post office lot that we used to own and would have to repurchase for probably more than what we sold it for, and get less land, by the way, because half of it's being used for the new fire station. All of those locations are within the tsunami inundation zone and the sea level rise inundation zone. And unfortunately, this district has not gotten around to doing a sea level rise plan, nor have we gotten around to doing a tsunami inundation plan, and an emergency evacuation plan. So those are all things that still need to happen. And for me, those are big priorities, because they, are gonna have huge impacts on our district, potentially. One, safety, the other one could mean that we have to literally consider relocating parts of the harbor. Could mean the harbor's getting bigger though. So, I think we have to be really honest about these things. And this building is up higher, so it is, outside of those inundation zones at this point. I would agree with the comments from a member of the public that we as a district need to conduct a strategic planning process. We need public outreach. We need a needs assessment. We've never done a needs assessment to figure out what the people who use our district actually need from the district. And that's something that's standard for most public agencies. This district has never ever done one. These things all need to happen first. So I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse here, trying to talk about purchasing something when we just hired a strategic planner at, what was that, 2 meetings ago?
Yes.
So 2 months ago, we hired a strategic planner. I don't know why we haven't met with him yet, but that hasn't happened. And, I think the sooner we can get that strategic planning process going, the better. And this is the kind of thing that we should be discussing during that strategic planning process so that it's inclusive of the public. Because I think there are things here that haven't necessarily been considered by our staff, especially considering the fact that our general manager does not live on the coast side. He lives in San Luis Obispo. So there are things that the coast side can bring to the table in a transparent process through strategic planning and ideas that possibly our staff hasn't thought of. And I think that kind of robust planning process is going to yield the best results. And we seem to be doing fine here, so I don't think there's any sort of impending emergency. You know, I'm not really sure why we're looking at this right now. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me with all the other things that the district needs to do and all the things that we haven't finished, such as the West Shoreline Trail, the sand replenishment. I mean, the list goes on. There are a lot of really important projects that we are not anywhere close to implementing yet. So I think we need to, you know, kind of think about our priorities here.
Okay.
Oh.
So your recommended motion is asking for next steps, and I would propose that your next step is to take and add to this and add it to the strategic planning and master planning process rather than have it as a separate item. I think with a strategic planning and with master planning, you'll bring in the public. I think it would not be looked upon favorably if we started a process where we were looking for a building without public input, with a harbor that needs repair in many places. It just doesn't seem right, and without a plan. We've got a lot of things on, even in just this meeting, that are piecemeal. My sense is it'd be much better for us, and the public would be much better served if we focused on a strategic plan, develop the master plan, and then work on this. And that would give you and the rest of the staff more time to really develop this. And just as an example of what I'm talking about for the public, in my view, putting infrastructure on areas that are adjacent to the coastal trail or near the harbor, if we decide to put in infrastructure, that seems to me, just as a member, if I think of myself just as a member of the public, I would rather see something that serves the public, not just meeting rooms for commissioners. So just in my simple view of the universe as it stands, I'd rather stay here and use the money for public serving facilities at the harbor. And so I think those are the kinds of things we really need to discuss, and we'd just be much better served finishing a strategic plan.
Okay, Robert?
Oh, I'm sorry, do you want it?
Oh, sorry.
No.
Thank you. I'm going to keep my comments very brief. I completely agree with the comments by Mr. Hahn. I am also confused why this has come up. If we do at some point, whether it's during strategic planning or not, discuss where we're going to be housed and headquartered, I do think that unless we have an expert who works at the Harbor District in commercial real estate, I'd like to bring a professional on board, someone who could really look at the market conditions, because after the Great Recession, market conditions totally changed. We're in a totally different market right now. I just sold property right now, and 6 months from now it can change. So really, I think it's very premature to be discussing where we want to be and what parcel we want to be in. I think that's just really way jumping ahead. So again, I just want to echo the comments by Mr. Hahn. I completely agree philosophically with what he said. Thank you.
Tom?
Commissioner Brennan and myself put a lot of effort, shoe leather, wear, vehicle mileage, time, and effort into finding a new administrative headquarters. I totally support getting a building of our own. Past boards, for whatever reason, seem destined to make bad decisions, ridding the Harbor District of land given to it by fishermen. I support the district owning its own assets. The lot adjacent to Sam's fits that vision. Paying rent to another entity is not my personal top priority. It's almost ironic. The building under consideration sits almost between the land formerly owned by the Harbor District. I support getting our own land, own our own buildings on land currently adjacent to the Harbor District. And, if we're all successful, perhaps soon we'll become part of the Harbor District. I gotta say, working in Phillip Point Harbor, parking is beyond valuable to me. I absolutely cannot support losing land behind Tennant Road. Commissioner Moreno brings up some good points about the strategic planning. We're not doing this tomorrow. Our staff is seeking direction. My direction is, number one, land next to Sam's. Number two, purchasing currently occupied at fire sale price due to deferred maintenance or anything else that we can actually effect at a decent rate. Yet we're not looking for ironically, the best deal would be admin, some work, possibly some public meeting space, but we have to balance what we're doing with our budget. So again, Sam's lot is number one, and I've already stated number two, number three. Please don't lose parking. If you don't work in the harbor, you have no idea how valuable parking is. The opening of salmon, the opening of crab, on different events, when fishing's good. There's a lot of times when you just can't find parking. I've sent pictures in when fishing is good, salmon. We've got boat, trucks, and trailers lined up past the little condo project there, almost to Sam's.
Yeah.
So I support getting our own place, and you have my priorities.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up and say that, again, I really agree with Commissioner Lorenas in that I think that this is something that we need to consider during a proper planning process. It's, all of these locations that have been mentioned this evening are within the coastal zone. They are all appealable to the Coastal Commission. If there is not community buy-in on whatever it is that we decide to do down the road, it's going to be a very lengthy and difficult process. Anyone can appeal a project. So it's certainly worth the effort to get community buy-in on whatever it is we end up doing and making sure that whatever facility we end up with is community serving. I think that I actually find this item a little embarrassing given all the things that the district needs to do, that we're sitting here as 5 commissioners who meet once a month talking about an administrative building, when what we really need to be doing is rebuilding Johnson Pier and thinking about facilities that help our boating community and our visitors. So it's not that I don't think that we need to get to this eventually. I just think that it feels a little bit like it's inappropriately out of step with the needs. And so that's why I get back to the lack of needs assessment. We haven't started a strategic planning process. We need a public process, and we definitely need to evaluate sea level rise and tsunami inundation with any planning that goes forward. And I also want to remind everybody that the situation on Highway 1 is a disaster over near Sam's Chowder House. And if we're going to increase the traffic problems there, I'm concerned about that. So there would have to be extensive traffic studies as to how one would access that location. There was a man who was just killed crossing the street by a sheriff who was driving. It was an accident. That happened only within the last couple of weeks, and there have been accidents in front of Sam's many, many times. So safety is definitely concerned. So I think we need to move on to other things and come back to this during the strategic planning process.
So I have a question, Steve. So it looks like in the budget, we have allocated $1.5 million for this kind of.
Not in the budget per se, but there is a district reserve account, a
Yeah.
committed reserve of 1.5 plus change. Can't remember the exact
Right.
amount.
Okay, so I think that a lot of the items that have been discussed tonight have been great ideas. Our charge right now is to provide direction to staff, as Tom said. I think that there are pros and cons to owning property. I think that if we did own or bought to own, I actually would be okay with Sam's Chowder House. I don't know where the post office is, so it's hard for me to visualize that, and I don't know what happened in the past. That's not to say that we shouldn't look at that. It's, it's an option 5. And I think that as a last resort, I think that, it'd be, I don't know, leasing is, in my opinion, should be the last resort, but I understand why. I mean, I know it took a long time to find this place, and there's been a lot of moving around things and, getting set up, and things still aren't set up. But I have a question. I was kind of reading this item along with the next item, item 12, which deals with the alteration of this office building. So, and I'm not getting to item 12, but how does that fit into this? Would you not do this if we decided to buy? I mean, I know you said that it's worth the 4 years, to make changes here, but I'm not sure that's the best use of money if we even go down that route. If we decide to stay here, then yes.
Could we talk
I'm
about
not
that
done,
with that
please.
item?
So I understand, that there are pros and cons. So in terms of direction, I don't know. I mean, I kind of agree with Tom. This is a direction, and maybe we should give direction you to explore different options, like owning, and if the priority, for example, is Sam's Chowder House, that property next to it, maybe that's something. I don't even know what the pricing is right now, except that it's like $1 million for that piece, right? I mean, I will say that it is not easy to find property in general. So, $1 million is actually not that bad of a price, but I don't have comps either, which were not included in this.
Right. Yeah, certainly there are no comps included in this. This is very preliminary
Right.
and just seeking a broad direction. As to any work being done on this building, I think the idea is that we try to explain in this staff report, but will be further explained in the next staff report, is that we're here for a number of years regardless.
Okay.
Regardless, we're here for 3 years at least, and that takes us through the end of the existing lease with extension.
This is 2020.
And staff believes that the improvements proposed by creating a dedicated meeting room that will be available to the general public, by increasing staff workflow and workplace safety and security, and ADA improvements are worthwhile given the amount of time we're going to be here.
I also agree with putting this together vis-a-vis the strategic plan and the master plan, but I don't think that not having that in place precludes you from doing, preliminary research like comps, for example. So I don't know how everyone else feels, but
I'm not comfortable with that. I would rather
So-
wait for the strategic planning process. This feels like we're doing something really weird here. This is not a proper process that involves the public.
What's
And
not a proper process?
We need to bring this in with the
We're
strategic
having a
planning.
public process right now.
We need to bring this in with the strategic planning process, otherwise we're just piecemealing as usual, and that doesn't work. We've done that for years, and that's why we
And we've
have,
gotten nowhere.
we have tons of plans that are collecting dust because we keep
Okay.
piecemealing, I mean, it's just, that's somewhere we've gotta stop doing that. It's not effective. So we need to come up with an overall plan for what we're doing and have good reasons for why we're doing it. We need to have the community support it. You can plan till your heart's content, but it doesn't mean that you're gonna get it through the coastal commission, number one. There are a lot of hurdles that you have to cross. And so we have to have a public process in order to get the buy-in on whatever it is that we're going to do. And I don't know what that's gonna be yet. So we've got to go through that. We can't make an end run around that process.
And I don't think anyone wants to make an end run, but Steve, really
No,
quickly, you wanted to comment.
No, I don't, there's certainly no intention to do an end run, and I think in all of these options, I talk about what the next steps are, and including
Right.
that direction in the strategic planning process.
Right.
Because I think it is critical that
has
the
to.
public be engaged in something as significant as this. And so that's why I was looking not for so much go forth and buy that parcel, but this is the sort of direction that we're thinking of. And then folding that in, we haven't started the strategic planning process yet. Debbie reminded me, it was in fact just last month that we, I think, selected that consultant, Roche. And so recognizing that things take time, is, I personally feel I'm happy to do whatever the commission directs us to do, but I do think that it's going to be a parallel track that will eventually reconnect at some point, an old part of the public process.
Vice President Crawley?
Oh,
Go ahead, Tom.
Tom?
Yeah, perhaps we could also put on Mr. McGraw's list thorough financial analysis of rent versus own. We want to make sure that while people are concerned about the public process, that we're moving in a direction that is not only approved, but it's financially viable to the Harbor District.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Ed.
Yeah, my feeling is that if you go and collect more information, that should go into a public strategic planning process. And one possibility from that process could be not to do a building.
Exactly
Right, yeah, that's the
And then on
point, is to
Tom's
look at the
point,
different
it's really important to, as part of that strategic planning process, to consider the impacts on parking. And it's also very important to bring in the city of Half Moon Bay, because they're having discussions and San Mateo County on what to do about traffic, and one of those aspects is to shuttle folks from Half Moon Bay to the harbor. And so it'd be much better if we had a public process where we put all of this together, rather than the Harbor District does what it wants, and then the city of Half Moon Bay does what they're thinking of doing, and none of it connects. It's an opportunity to do this as part of our strategic plan.
Certainly in strategic planning, there was much given to the idea of reaching out to neighboring jurisdictions, as in the city of Half Moon Bay. I think that I don't want to belabor this point, but the direction that I'm getting pretty clearly is that there may have been some valuable groundwork done, the discussion has started, but that this fold into and be fed into the strategic planning process. I think that will most definitely mean that we will be back to the board looking for direction on lease negotiations at the end of this term. We'll be starting that process in June 2020 for the expiration of the lease, May of 2021.
I'd like to follow up though, because I think there's a couple things. Did I cut you off? Did you have something else?
Yeah, I'd like to.
I was close to wrapping up,
Okay.
Commissioner Brennan.
Well, just that, there's some key things that we have to have that have been brought up over and over again, which is we really need to do a parking needs study, because as Tom said, the parking situation is out of control, and we've got people parking in our parking lots that are walking to work outside of the area, or they're parking there and then they're going to other facilities that aren't ours, like restaurants and what have you. And then, of course, we've got the camping, which we might want to reevaluate. We have a serious parking problem, so we have got to do some kind of a parking study and try to figure out how we're going to address this serious parking problem. The second thing is we have a traffic issue, especially if we were going to consider having a facility along Highway 1. And if, this also comes back to tsunami inundation. If we got wiped out in a tsunami and our administrative office got wiped out, we would be in a really bad place. If our facility is completely wrecked due to a tsunami and our management staff can't get the district back on its feet again and fix the facility and run it from a location that's not damaged, then we're in a world of hurt. So we need to make sure that our administrative office is in a safe place on high ground that is not going to be inundated, so that we can still operate the district and get the district back on its feet, so that the commercial fishermen can get back to work, and so on and so forth. So these are key things.
This is the sort of direction I'm looking for, and if the board were to say, only consider property on the north of Highway 1, that would be good direction to receive, and I could stop even thinking about the B lot, about the Sam's lot.
That's oversimplifying it. What I'm saying is we need a strategic plan process started. We need a public process We need a sea level rise and a tsunami inundation plan, 2 separate plans, one emergency plan for tsunami inundation, one a sea level rise plan for the district, and then we need a parking study and we need a traffic study. Those are all separate things. Those are all necessary to move forward with any of this. And it's all gonna be needed, you know, for anything that we plan to do.
Tom?
Yes, right here. I just wanted to add that doing a financial analysis before the completion of the strategic plan would be seriously helpful. The public needs to have an idea of the value. I'm truly not ever a person in favor of renting. I'm not going to be here to finance someone else's dreams. I don't believe that paying rent to anybody is ever effective. But at the same time, I think we're moving towards a direction. The staff wants direction. My direction is to focus on purchase. The commission's job is not to micromanage. The commission's job is to provide direction. My direction, my recommendation is find a place to build and buy. Whether you say it's the parking lot, it was part of what we sold, whether it's like the parking lot for the fire district, whether it's a vacant lot. Please buy something, build something that becomes an asset and something valuable to the Harbor District and the voters of San Mateo County. That's my direction. My recommendation and direction is purchase, not rent.
So do we need
At the same time, look at where you are. Look at the room you're sitting in. Look at Sabrina Brennan and give her credit.
So I would agree with that, and I would prefer to buy as well and own the asset. So I agree with the
We're
financial
going
analysis.
around in circles here.
I'm sorry, you are out of order. You
It's just-
talked more than
it's-
anyone else.
We need to move
So
on.
anyway, so do you feel like you have any direction, Steve?
I seem to get a sense, although there has been some discussion about continuing to lease, the idea seems to be generally that we would be best served in ownership of something. The idea seems to be generally that we
I
should
haven't
fold that
given that
into the...
direction, so I'm not.
Sorry, I would
Okay.
like the general
All right.
manager to
We need
finish
to
his
vote.
In that
comment.
case,
Let's
no, there's
vote.
no vote.
There's no vote,
It's
it's
just seeking
direction.
direction, and clearly there's no direction, so why don't we move on to
There's
the
no
next item?
direction.
Why don't we move on to
Well,
the
then I
next
guess
item where
there's
we
no
get something
direction as
done,
to the
and we'll
strategic
just do the
plan either
strategic plan.
then.
There we go.
Thank
Very
you.
good.
So item 12, John.
All right, this is a motion to authorize the general manager to move forward with competitive bid for the construction phase of the administrative office alteration project after design, engineering, and regulatory compliance have been completed. And keep in mind, this is just to authorize the general manager to put a project to bid. After we receive bids, those bids would come back for approval of the lowest bid. The district admin office, here located at 504 Avenue, Alhambra, consists of the entire second floor, leased from Working Dirt, Inc. The current lease expires in May 2018, but the district has a contractual guaranteed option to extend for an additional 3 years. The current floor plan configuration is not the best use of the square footage, is not best suited for security concerns, and lacks open connectivity between the workstations and offices. The proposed new floor plan, which is attached in your pamphlets, and I've got some slides if you desire to look at them. But the new plan will allow for a defined storage mailroom area separated from the conference meeting room. Will create a reception room desk closer to the entrance door, providing controlled access and a more secure employee workplace. Provide an interior connection between the two sides of the building that allows for the separation of the workspace from the potentially more public area of space. Provide a professional conference meeting room which could be available for use by other local agencies and community organizations, which has recently been requested and brought to our attention as a need of the public. And it will also address, identify ADA issues in the restrooms, and the entrance exits, and signage. The commission may consider a reduced project or no project at all. As has been presented by the general manager's previous staff report regarding a permanent home for the district administration, two significant factors affect the options presented in that report: development of a strategic plan and the timing. Staff believes that regardless of the options selected or direction given, the amount of time necessary to develop new space suggests that the district will remain in this building at least through the 3 options on the existing lease, which will terminate in May of 2021. Given that, staff believes that these improvements to workplace safety, ADA compliance, and public access, meeting room, organization are worthwhile investments, even for a 4-year minimum time frame. Therefore, staff recommends the board authorize the general manager to move forward with competitive bid for the construction phase of the administrative office alteration project after design, engineering, and regulatory compliance have been completed.
Okay, thank you. I do have a couple of one public comment from Lisa Ketchum for item 12. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. This time I am speaking as a MCC member. And I have to say that when you folks first moved here and I came to a committee meeting, I coveted this room. And we have been having our meetings at the Granada Sanitary District since I think 2013. They've been kind enough to let us use their room for free, and we meet twice a month, and it's quite often not big enough. And here, I'm looking at your floor plan and 30 seats. I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, we still, the coast side clearly needs, a really big venue, but this would cover most of it. And I hope you go forward with this, and I hope that you will let us use your room. Thank you.
And then I got another written comment from Dan Haggerty. It says, I support the concept of making Harbor District space available for local public meetings. There is a current great local need for this use. So that's all I've got for public comments. So I'll open it up to commissioner comment. Robert?
Thank you. I agree with both public comments in terms of using Harbor District space for whoever wants to use it, basically, for the public. For me, I support this for other reasons. In addition to that, I support it. Where I work, I do all of the workplace violence and safety trainings. And on that note, that's why I support this. It's just from a safety perspective in terms of configuration of access and just access points, access and exit points. So I totally support this.
Marina?
I just am glad to see this finally on our agenda. And back when we signed our lease for this space in April of 2015, I worked really hard to get the building owner to agree to do work to this space to make it a nice meeting space. And that included constructing a wall, adding a countertop so that we could have some coffee for people if they wanted, and adding another door so that this would be the storage room, so you wouldn't all be looking at this storage crap here, and then we could have the board sit here and we'd have more room for the public and they'd be able to hear us. So that was sort of the vision, and we built in the cost of that into this lease agreement, at least hopefully most of the cost. I understand that our staff is now talking to the landlord about implementing finally these things that were supposed to have been started when we first moved into the building, but were delayed by past management. So I'm very excited to see us finally looking at doing these things. I think it's going to make the meeting space much more accessible for people, easier to hear, and I think having the board be able to look at one another hopefully will improve our relations. That would be great. So I also strongly support opening up the space for community use, and I agree with Ms. Ketchum that there are community groups that are, desperately need meeting space, and right now, as it stands, Granada Community Services District's calendar of meetings that use their space is booked. I mean, it's just overflowing, and they do that as a service to the community, which is really a wonderful thing. So I'm glad that we're moving in the direction of being able to also offer that to the public, and I think that will help, help our community. And I think it's very wonderful that we live in a community where there are so many people who are involved with local groups and they need meeting space. And we want to, I hope that we want to help facilitate that kind of community engagement. So I strongly support this.
Okay. Tom, do you have any comments?
Not at this point, but another member of the public joined us. So there's another member listening to our procedures. Thank you.
Does he or she have any comment on this issue?
Not at this point.
Okay.
Okay, well, I completely agree with everyone here. It's nice to see that we can all agree on at least one thing. I fully support it for all the reasons that were stated.
So I'll make a motion that we authorize the general manager to move forward with competitive bid for the construction phase of the administrative office alteration project after design, engineering, and regulatory compliance have been completed.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
President Matoush?
Tom?
President Matoush?
Approve.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Item 13, Pillar Point Harbor H-Dock demolition and replacement project update. John?
All right, this staff report is regarding the Phillip Point Harbor H-Dock demolition and replacement project. For the board to receive an update presentation from our consultant Moffett and Nichols and provide input to the staff. This is really just a first look at conceptual plans that our consultant have come up with to increase the number of berths potentially at Phillip Point Harbor's H-Dock, and look at ideas regarding ADA compliance. I'd like to introduce Neil Nichols from Moffett and Nichols.
Before we get started, I have a clarifying question,
Yes.
and I'm hoping council can answer it. Since we have a commissioner on the board who operates his business from H-Dock, could you just clarify for us why this is not a FPPC concern?
So, it's really a question for Commissioner Matoush, not a question for me. As you know from our own past experiences, I represent the district. Commissioner Matoush and I have spoken on this, and it's really his decision whether or not to recuse himself.
Tom, would you care to comment on that?
We're talking about general design and benefits to the public. There's no better person to comment on this. There's no one more familiar with the project. If indeed the conversation degenerates to something where I have or inure some personal benefit, then indeed I will be the first person to step back. But at the present time, H-Dock, there's no one on the commission, there's no one on the Harbor District Administrative Board that has more familiarity with H-Dock than myself.
And just for clarification, what slip are you at, Tom?
Did you hear that, Tom?
H9, well, I'm trying to block out cleaning people in the room. So it's, I'm in H9, I have to hit the mute button and then unmute and mute and so on.
Thank you. So you're going to participate in our discussion, sounds like. So let's move on with the presentation. Tom, there's a presentation that's being made right now. You probably can't see it, but it's pretty much in the packet. Thank you. Yes,
Sorry, okay.
please.
I'm Neil Nichols. I'm with Moffett and Nickel, the designer for the district here on HDOC. We've been working with John. What you guys are seeing here is the conceptual layout that we recently proposed. This is a replacement project, but it is also an extension of HDOC further to the east. The goal is to make use of that available water space that, originally it was set aside for a separate pier in various iterations of earlier plans. So we want to extend Dock H out toward the breakwater. The logical extension of that is it affects Docks G and F. And so we wanted to look at what would you do for Dock G and F in the future when those need to be replaced. We want them all to dovetail together. So we are trying to do F, G, and H together as a whole to see what they can fit. So we use that to locate Dock H and see how many slips we can get in there. We also did look at, you can see some of the work off to the other side of Johnson Pier and KBC also, just to get an idea of the whole marine, what could be done in the future and get an idea of the total slips. But focusing on HDOC, we're extending at about 205 feet, give or take. There are 3 sizes of slips as far as lengths. We have the green ones there are 50 footers, the cyan is 55, and the blue are 65s. This is, you can't quite see it, but there's some little markings there on these. Those are letters EW for extra wide. All the others are like a standard double berth, so these are all double berths similar to what we have now. But those are wider, just to give a little bit extra space for the vessels that are a little bit bigger in the beam. The green ones, each of those slips are 1 foot wider than the standard, and the cyan, the 55s and the 65s are both 2 feet wider than standard. Pretty much the same sort of dock, concrete guide piles, although this dock we're leaning toward the concrete docks themselves just for durability instead of the timber ones, pontoons one that we have now. And the ADA component is coming off of a new gangway coming off of Johnson Pier right there. That would be an 80-footer. So it can be accessible, especially since this is the first one going. So we would get ADA accessibility immediately. Whether we want to do it elsewhere on F or G is it's a possibility. We want to have as many options for the future F or G as possible. The gangway is coming down parallel to Johnson Pier as opposed to what we have now, really coming up perpendicular to Johnson Pier. It just makes better use of the space on the actual main walk of the dock. So we're going to come down parallel to Johnson Pier. It's going to land on a marginal wharf, a wider section of wharf, to also support the transformer. Right now the transformer is somewhere in here and it takes up part of that berth. So we want to get that out of the way, put it off on the marginal wharf up next to that gangway. And you also have the fuel dock coming in here, and what you're seeing there is what we think is a better alignment, but that doesn't have to be part of this project. It's just part of the conceptual master plan, if you want to call it that. You could just reconnect the existing fuel dock to the H dock if that would be the best way to go forward. And the upper part of the gangway will connect onto a new concrete, like a brow. It's pile supported, a single pile, but it'll tie into Johnson Pier. So it'll move with Johnson Pier, not independent of it. What else? It'll have normal utilities, pedestals and everything, or no support. It'll provide power to each slip. And we're also showing a couple of end ties here it will get utilities also.
So Commissioner.
I have a
Williams has-
question
sure.
for you. Tom, can you hear this? So the fuel.
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. So my question is about the fuel dock and that space in between the fuel dock and the first
The blue.
finger. Is that space going to change in length?
What I'm seeing from the plans is that it's 50 feet wide. That's going to be considerably less than it is now. That would imply that some slips are added. The other thing is, the commission should get into the leases of the fuel dock. The entire maintenance of the fuel dock in every way, shape, and form is the responsibility of the tenant. And you can look that up. The ice house, all those things are 100% responsibility of the tenant. So that has little to nothing to do with the HDOC unless there's some new agreement with the tenant.
Okay, that helps.
Any other questions?
Not yet.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
that maneuvering spot is gonna get a little bit smaller.
Is there a way we could go get a close-up so we can see?
Yeah.
I mean, the configuration of the fuel dock is looking really different. And I was,
Does that help?
yeah, maybe scoot it over a little bit to the, well, I guess that's the whole, to the right or, no?
You wanna
Could
see
you,
the
could you
end?
just explain what's different? Like maybe with the pointer, explain what's different?
Yeah. So this is the end of the existing dock right there. There's a 206 foot extension. And this is also an extension of dock G next to it, but that's where it ends right now.
Okay.
So it's getting a lot closer to the breakwater, and we can only get within 75, we want a 75-foot channel. That's the minimum that we want to have, so that's as far as we can go out toward the breakwater. And as far as number of slips, the text is kind of smaller, but existing, right now what we have is, we have 26 50-footers, and we're proposing 37, those are all the green ones. 55-footers, there are 7 right now, and we're proposing 13. 65-footers, there's 12 right now, and we're proposing 60. But it includes the 2 end ties, so it's, you can maybe not count those 2. So there's a total of 19 new slips, plus 21 new slips. And as far as the berth lineal feet, you know, if that's how we rent them by linear feet, would be about 1,140, that's a real number right there. Just multiply the number times the length.
But what about because you talked about extending the other docks as well. Is this like another sort of piecemeal thing where we would just do this one, but what about the others? Like, can we look at those?
This is the tip of the spear, yeah, so this is the first project. It was initially, we're just gonna replace HDOC, it's in the worst shape, it has the biggest vessels, it gets beat up the most apparently, so this one needs to go first, is the direction that we have. And so, thinking down the line, okay, we gotta do G next, or F and G or something like that. So, okay, well, if we wanna do all of these at once and if we can do them all now, what would we do? So what we looked at was the whole thing, also the other side. But this is a conceivable layout for all F and G if that happens in the future. So the main thing we have to provide is aisle widths in between the 2 adjacent docks and access around the end. So we want to make sure we locate this, keeping in mind, well, what size slips do we want? Because the aisle widths are dependent on the length of the slips.
Mm-hmm.
So once you pick the length of your boat, that determines how big that aisle needs to be. So this is kind of a holistic look, like how many spots do we want and what size do we want? But we can only do H right now, and we're gaining everything we want. We're gaining in every size that we want, plus some extra wides.
why do you say we can only do H? Why can't we just, because here's what I'm concerned about. I know how hard it is to get through the permitting process, and every time we have to go through that process, it costs us money. It would be cheaper, I think, if we just went ahead and got the permitting for doing H, G, and F. That way we could get our CDP for the entire project, and the Coastal Commission really likes to have a programmatic CDP where they're including the full project, not the piecemeal project. So I guess I should be talking to
Well,
staff.
as I indicated in the staff report, I did say that we've already asked Moffett Nickel to get with California Coastal Commission, which they've done, and present this concept to them, and they agree with our recommendation that we were going to go with a programmatic approach to this, with an overall CDP, but attack it in
phases.
Yeah, exactly. Just
Okay.
primarily because the marina is operating at 100%. So it'll be challenging, for us to temporarily relocate even one dock while we're the people from one dock while we're.
So what's the timeline for getting the whole project done on all 3 docks?
We've not gotten that far yet. We're at present, obviously, just trying to get some feedback from the board, and the next steps will be for Moffett Nickel to arrange public meetings, so that we can then get feedback from the tenants themselves and the public, and see what kind of configuration the public wants, or what the marina tenants, for instance, on H dock and the rest of the facility desire, with the overall picture in mind. If you flip back real quick, Neil, to the very first one, it does show that in addition, we're looking at, even on F and G docks here, can add another 62 berths, and then we can get another, the way it's laid out right now in this conceptual drawing, we can get another 24 berths over on the west side of Johnson Pier. But again, this is just a first look. We wanted to get the board's thoughts and present this through the board packet to the public. And then the next steps will be for Moffett Nickel to organize our first of several, most likely, at least public meetings.
Could we incorporate that public process with our strategic planning process? Because I think that this is a big change, and I think I'm guessing that there are gonna be a lot of people that support it, especially people that can't get a slip right now. I don't think, it doesn't seem to me, at least I certainly haven't heard that there's anybody opposing adding more slips in this sort of configuration. So, we have this strategic planning process starting, maybe we let Moffett Nickel go first in the workshop, but we can also if we're gonna bother to get everybody together, let's not waste time, and there are probably other things we can get input on at that time. So I'm just saying, instead of having all these different meetings.
I've seen the general manager nod as well. I think that makes sense. The only thing I would caveat that by is just to say that we could come back to the board if it seemed that things were with the strategic plan and the meetings were being delayed significantly, that we don't want to hesitate, I don't think, too much on moving forward with H-Doc, keeping in mind that we could implement, for instance, future docs, or even later in the process with H-Doc, have more public meetings that are in conjunction with the strategic plan.
Well, I understand that, I don't disagree, but I also think, another thing I'm thinking of is that it would be nice if we had at least one project idea that we were talking about in strategic planning that people actually really liked, and this would seem like one of those kinds of positive type projects. So anyway, however it works out, but.
Yeah, with what Moffett Nickel has come up with, let me see that. This is all their engineer's design and ideas here with the eventual ADA parallel dock. So these would be ADA ramps here and here and here, thus making the majority of our entire facility accessible, which is very unusual. Generally, marinas will only have one or two designated docks with a ramp that goes directly to just those accessible docks. With this design, every dock will be accessible to some degree. You know, a real ADA accessible marina berth or marina dock also has the electric pedestals at a certain height, water, etc., and are sufficiently wide enough. But you know, for the impaired persons, they would be able to access everywhere in our marina.
One thing that comes to mind though is that with the additional dock space, which we clearly need, comes additional vehicles parking. And so I think that that's something that we need to be talking about, because as Tom mentioned, there's already, you know, not enough parking as it is, so we need to figure out, you know, how we're gonna accommodate the additional vehicles.
Yeah, the general manager has directed us to propose ideas regarding parking, one of which might be more limited RV parking, or more controlled RV parking. Because those RVs, obviously, when they're spread out all over with tables and slide outs and everything, they do take up a considerable amount of space.
Okay, so I have 3 public comment slips, so I'm gonna take that right now. The first is from Lisa Damrosch. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Lisa.
Hi, I'm not actually sure if this is the right place for my public comment. I didn't want to put a comment slip in for every agenda item, but we sent a letter earlier today from the Half and Bay Seafood Marketing Association regarding 5 items on the agenda tonight that are all regarding Phillip Point Harbor infrastructure changes. This was the first of the 5, so that's why I put my comment slip in. So I think it's really well documented that the Seafood Marketing Association feels very strongly about stakeholder input in changes to infrastructure. This particular agenda item was refreshing because it explained very clearly that the next step would be, public outreach meetings where the actual users of the facility would have something to say before it came back to you for final approval. So we appreciated that. So I just want to say that about this. I don't know if I should be putting in a speaker slip for the next 3 items, or if I can just have you look at our letter, whichever. But that's what I had to say about this item. I guess I'll put more slips and you'll see.
Feel free to do that.
Okay.
Thanks. James Lee Hahn. Thanks, James.
Hello again. I just wanted to say that I support the Marketing Association's letter. I also urge you, along as stated in their letter, to table items 15 through 17. Real quickly though, I want to just ask, maybe this is something that Moffitt and Nickel could address, but I was kind of wondering what, in the plan, if there's been any study about how changing the dock configuration affects sedimentation inside the harbor, and what that does to, if at all, if it does anything to the patterns there. Because as we all know, sedimentation within the harbor is a problem. That's part of the reason why Surfers Beach is disappearing. So yeah, I'd like to know more about that.
Do you have any comments on that, Steve?
No, this
Sedimentation
will be
issue.
something that will come out. Again, this is this 10,000-foot elevation look.
Yeah.
We're getting into
So
detail.
it's something to consider. And then Mary Marinas.
So I'm a sailboat person, so I'm a 39-foot sailboat, so I'm not a big boat person, but I want to make sure or understand that when you decrease the width of the turnaround space in order to add extra space for the slip next door, does that in any way cause a safety issue for that space being narrowed? Because it was designed on that dock, right by the fuel docks where I'm talking, there's an empty space. That was designed wider for a purpose when it originally was put in, and now it's being made narrow. So I don't, if anybody could address that. But similar to what James said then, because the inner breakwater, I don't know if the inner breakwater was designed to fit X number of slips along H-dock, and now we're extending H-dock closer to the breakwater, if that's some sort of possible navigational problem. And again, it's, you know, your bigger boat guys that would know whether that was safer. I wouldn't, but I'm just curious about those two items. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can answer that.
Yes, please.
Well, Mary, I appreciate your, you know, your input and your concerns, and just everyone be known that the design that Moffett and Nickel has put together is within the stringent guidelines of Division of Boat Waterways, where all of the fairway widths between opposing slips, for instance, are 1.5, the length 1.5 times the length of the opposing berths or opposing largest boats. Now there's, Neil, you can probably speak to it better than I, but there's, you know, obviously the width of the fairways at the end of the docks, you know, between the end of the dock and the breakwater, also doesn't even start until the width, the beam of the boats that are tied on the end ties are also taken into consideration. So
yeah, I mean, the aisleways between two opposing docks is meant for backing up and turning around, so that's why the 1.75. You can do the 1.5, but we'd rather stay at the more conservative.
yeah, 1.5 is it's like a worldwide
Yeah.
standard.
Yeah.
1.75 is the design of this is even better.
But once they're underway, they don't need 1.75.
Yeah.
So once your entrance channel is typically 75 feet for two-way. So that's what we're giving, 75 feet along the breakwater. For the field dock, I don't think that area is, there's no, I don't think there's a pump there. It's more of the ice house, I think. So I think that turning area is, I don't think we really want vessels in there turning.
No, it would just
think,
be a,
I think there's a little bit more room on the outside for them to turn around.
yeah, that would be more an operations
Yeah,
issue
yeah.
versus what's been done in the past.
Yeah.
But those will just be, you know, boats, that area would just be for boats coming alongside to fuel and then to, you know, to back out of there in a relatively easy manner. So leaving plenty of width for maneuverability. And then speaking real quickly to the reconfiguration, if you will, of the fuel dock, making it go straight out to the west instead of making the dog leg, that's largely due to potentially us getting this Tiger grant that we'll be discussing in a moment, which part of that would be continuing Johnson Pier straight out to the west.
Okay, yeah, sit down. Okay. Do you have a
I
comment?
do have a comment,
Okay.
since we're talking about the fuel dock. So at this point in time, though, as Tom said, there will not be any changes to the fuel dock configuration because that's on the person that's leasing it.
Yeah.
So I was happy to see, though, in the plan, looking forward, because the fuel dock is not the greatest and it will need some help at some point. So I think it's proper to have it in the plan like you have it. I think that's fantastic. But also when you're looking at this document, I think you should also consider the fact that it's not going to change at any immediate point in time. So you have to consider both.
Tom, do you have any members of the public who wish to make public comment with you?
Not on this item, but I would like to add and remind, I'd like to see a workflow analysis. Because there's a difference between charter boats, there's a difference between commercial boats. When are the boats busy for crab, salmon, rock cod, whale? What is the difference between the commercial use of HDOC during commercial and recreational? And when are the greatest periods of usage for each? Now, EcoTrust study a long time ago said that we're losing a lot of commercial boat participation in Pillar Point Harbor. In my personal opinion, that's turning around, and we're seeing more commercial activity from the EcoTrust study. Please look up the EcoTrust study if you haven't seen it. However, you also see a lot more recreational boats on HDOC. We've got liveaboards on HDOC. What is the usage structure of the dock at the current time? Thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments before, I just want to make sure you've got you've written down kind of direction, okay.
I have a question about the fuel dock.
Okay.
So I'm not totally clear on understanding why we can't go ahead and rebuild the fuel dock since it's so funky and old and dilapidated. Why is that not happening?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's not happening. In fact, I'm the one that actually asked Moffett Nickel to include it in this project because even though it may not be, based on the lease, an improvement to the floating dock structure itself, may not be, or may be under the responsibilities of the lessee. It may be once we're mobilized and we've got the contractor actually out there, it would be the most cost-effective time to go ahead and replace that fuel dock as well. So I think we'll be looking back to the board for further direction, whether we wait to potentially redo the fuel dock at a later time, or if in talking further with Moffett Nickel as we move forward, that it'd be most cost effective to do it in conjunction at the same time with HDOC.
And just my last question is, we talked about a public process and we've gotten a lot of feedback that that's desired. What does that mean? What is in the scope of the project? Like, are we talking about one meeting? What's the plan for public outreach?
When we did the initial work directive with Moffett and Nickel, we did specify 2 public outreach meetings. So that would be our starting point. Okay. And we'd see where we need to go from there.
Okay, great. So if you need anything.
I don't think we need specific motions. We've received lots of public input and direction from the board. So I think, John, you good?
Yeah. And Tom will follow up on your concerns as well.
Great.
I just do want to say that I'm really happy that we're looking at this more holistically. So I think that's great, and versus just what we sort of originally were talking about. So I'm glad to see the project is getting more well thought out.
And I just have one last comment, and that is on the public outreach portion of this. Please reach out to myself and others on the commission because we have communities that we work with and we can help you bring in the public.
Thank you.
Great. So moving on to item 14, which is the Tiger Discretionary Grant for 2017 for National Infrastructure Investments Grant application, Johnson Pier Transportation Expansion. John.
Okay, this is a motion to adopt Resolution 17-18 and approve submittal of the Tiger Grant application to the U.S. Department of Transportation for an amount not to exceed $5.3 million for pier and road improvements for public safety, and truck vehicle access to and from Pillar Point Harbor's Johnson Pier for commercial fish loading and transport. The Tiger Grant is a grant through Department of Transportation, so it is not for for recreational commercial marinas. It is a transportation investment generating economic recovery grant. So the district applied unsuccessfully for this grant in 2016. In this grant cycle, $500 million is available to surface transportation infrastructure projects that will have a significant impact on the nation, a metropolitan area, or a region. The Johnson Pier was originally designed to accommodate loading of small trucks with product by wholesale commercial fish handlers operating on the pier. Efficient use of large trucks nowadays has been hampered by the pier's design and size constraints. This problem has been particularly acute during very busy fishing seasons. These trucks must back onto the pier, all the way down the pier, and unload one at a time. This necessity creates a safety hazard as well. Additionally, the trucks must negotiate two difficult road intersections to reach and leave the pier. The road constraints increase the time efficiency of operations and also create safety hazards. Additional pier deck area will be constructed to accommodate concurrent truck loading, more maneuvering room, and to enable the trucks to drive onto the pier front first. This will be quicker, more efficient, and much safer than the existing arrangement. This commission should also be aware of the 4 other items on this agenda related to projects at Pillar Point Harbor. We just discussed HDOC. We've also got a piling repair, additional authorization for regulatory compliance monies, and then we've got, we'll discuss later, the 3 captains work dock relocation and Morningstar Fisheries second hoist release. The total cost, or the total project cost for this project of widening Johnson Pier, the end of Johnson Pier, was estimated at $6,540,000. The total includes design, permits, taxes, and a contingency. While the project may be 100% funded, if deemed a rural area, most likely, if the grant is awarded to the district, it will cover 80% of the project costs. The district will be responsible for 20% of the project, the cost share. That would be approximately $1,308,000. Should the Tiger Grant application be successful, staff will work closely with all stakeholders on the pier to ensure proper coordination of effort, appropriate stakeholder input into final design of the project, and efforts to relocate any equipment on the pier on a permanent or temporary basis as is necessary. Staff recommends this commission adopt Resolution 17-18 authorizing submittal of a grant application in an amount not to exceed $5.3 million.
Thank you. So Commissioner comments? I know Ed had a comment, right?
Just a point of clarification, if I understand this correctly, the Tiger Grant has already been applied for, and we're being asked to approve it in retrospect.
As I stated in the staff report,
yeah.
The Tiger Grant did come upon us very quickly. Generally, they come out, as my understanding from what I've seen in the past, they come out toward the beginning of the year. This one did not come out at the beginning of the year. The general manager caught it, and so we were under time constraints that required us to go ahead and move forward. So we did file the paperwork.
Yep.
However, we're not bound by anything, and we're asking the board's approval to actually apply for it.
Any other
Just to follow up on that, though, I think that happened once before where we missed like the board wasn't given a chance to vote in advance of filing the paperwork. So I think that, you know, that, to me, that's a concern, and I would hope that, somehow, I understand if it's a challenge and they're not notifying people correctly or what, or they're not getting a lot of notice, but somehow we need to get in better communication with the people who set the deadline so that it's in front of the board earlier. Because my big concern is, number one, the application is not in this packet, so I've not seen it, and now it's already been submitted, so I'd like to see it.
We've got it online now.
It is,
Good. Yeah.
when did that go up?
Debbie put it online today, or have you yet?
It may not be.
Okay,
I know you were
Tonight.
discussing it later on, or earlier today, that we were gonna put it online.
It'll be definitely there tomorrow.
so it'll be online if the public wants to look at it tomorrow. In the past, I've gotten feedback from the public that, there have been concerns about the quality of our application. And I did talk to Steve about that earlier, and he seems to think it's better than it was previously. But just based on the drawings that I'm seeing in the staff report, it looks really similar, this stuff looks really similar to what we've seen in past staff reports. And we haven't gotten this grant before, and I understand you guys are doing things a little bit differently that might help us, you know, in getting the grant. And I know there's a lot of competition, but I think that presentation is really important when you're trying to get a grant. And my concern is that I haven't seen the application. In the past, the application was not impressive. And if it came on my desk and I saw it, I wouldn't approve it. I wouldn't want to fund it. I'd be like, what the heck am I looking at? This looks like a big mess. So, you know, somehow we've really got to get our grant applications in top-notch form. Otherwise, we're not going to stand out as a good applicant. So I haven't seen it, so maybe it's fabulous. I don't know what it looks like, but I just, you know, it's something that concerns me. And I think if we look at this carefully, what I find is that part of the reason why the application wasn't good previously is because there was never the opportunity for the stakeholder input, which would have made it a great application. And so if you don't vet things with the public and you don't vet things with the stakeholders, then you end up with a not well vetted application, and it's not going to stand out as, you know, excellent if you're missing the checks and balances that would make it, you know, better than it has been. So, you know, my biggest concern about all of this is just that I'm so glad you guys caught it, you know, because certainly we want to apply for grant money. But, you know, the fact that it already got submitted, we haven't seen it, and the staff report, the drawings are like, I have no idea what these drawings mean. This looks like craziness here, especially on page 14.3, and then also on page 14.4. You know, I don't think anybody could understand what these drawings mean. Certainly, we could do a better job of explaining things to people so that they want to give us money, and certainly we could do a better job of bringing in the public to the process so that we can show, like, we could have had tons of letters from stakeholders in support of us getting a grant, and letters of support from electeds. Did you guys get any of those?
We were.
You're working on that.
They'll be on the website.
Even though we were, let me just clarify a little bit, even though we were not able, unfortunately, to present and to ask approval prior to tonight's meeting, we did catch it within we had almost a month. So we were able to renew our letters of support from everyone we got last year, and the general manager last year in 2016's application actually got a lot of positive comments and accolades for the professionalism of our application last year, and did have a professional federal grant writer assist in that creation of that application last year. What we understood occurred was that unfortunately, they didn't determine that Pillar Point Harbor was a rural area. So the amount that we were requesting last year wasn't within the guidelines for meeting those criteria. So this year, we still had time to send the application and the memo to Moffett and Nickel, have Moffett and Nickel relook at it for us and make some alterations to some of the drawings. Could it have been better? I'm not saying that it couldn't have been better, and I have to take responsibility for not. The general manager did ask me to make sure we keep an eye out for it, but for when the grant is going to come up, and we were looking, myself and our planner analyst, and one day it wasn't there, monies had not been funded for it, and then it was, and the general manager did catch it. It was not, we didn't catch it as soon as we had liked to. We would like to have caught it the same day. We were still able also to send our application once we got it back from our memo back from Moffett and Nickel with the technical specifications, including the drawings that are within the staff report that the staff report may not be explained as good as it is in the application. Once we got the drawings and everything back from Moffett and Nickel, we were able to have it reviewed by one of the grantor Department of Transportation representatives for us. So I think this time we did due diligence, and we're going to obviously keep our fingers crossed that we do get it approved this year.
Well, I do remember,
Okay, so
I
I'm
think
gonna
it was,
take Commissioner Bernardo's comments. We're at almost 9:10, and I still have 2 public comments, and I want to hear from the president and also Commissioner Bernardo, and
Well,
then
I'll
I'll
wait
come
till-
back.
I'll
Yeah,
wait.
thank you. Robert?
Thank you. Just really briefly, we where I work at the Port of Oakland, we go after these Tiger grants regularly, and just from my understanding, they are super competitive. And I mean, the few agencies that get them, I mean, there's so much. I mean, there's so much strategy and politicking that goes behind the scenes for these things. So if you want to go for it, please go for it. And if we can get it, even better. But yeah, these are really hard to get, as you already know, I'm sure.
Tom?
We've heard numerous presentations from General Manager McGraw about attending CMAC meetings, getting feedback, meeting people that are on the Tiger Grant Committee. The administration has worked very diligently to improve the process of the grant application. It's not the point of the board to nitpick or micromanage the board or the staff. The concept here is to move in the direction to make the Harbor District a better and more functional thing for the entire county and for its users. I'd like to motion right now to adopt Resolution 1718 and approve the submittal of Tiger Grant applications to the United States Department of Treasury in an amount not to exceed $5.4 million for the pier and road improvements for public safety and truck vehicle access to and from Pillar Point Harbors, Johnson Pier for commercial fish loading and transport.
Second.
Okay, so I have 2 public comment speakers. So George Well. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President.
Just a reminder, there is a motion, Debbie, and a second.
Yes.
Thank you.
George Wells on behalf of 3 Captains Seafood Products. Larry Furtado's out of town because of a death in his family, so he won't be here tonight. He wanted to be. I'm speaking on this line item because staff combined the 5 line items, and the seafood marketing, San Mateo County Seafood Marketing Association is requesting this board defer acting on the other line items that we're going to get to. I've heard commissioners tonight mention a number of very important topics. High attorney's fees, community buy-in, stakeholder input, litigation, and contractual obligations, as well as permitting process was mentioned. The idea of combining this grant with other line items on this agenda, including contractual obligations this board has, makes absolutely no sense. This board has tenants at the fish buyers building that have been there, 3 captains, for more than 35 years. It has contractual obligations to those tenants. It's received a lot of community input, stakeholder input. In 2014, when it granted 3 captains the first location for the hoist, in 2015, when this board took away that permission to have the second hoist, which was in the contract from 2013, even while the Coastal Commission application was pending. In 2016, there were 10 members of the public that spoke when this board decided to approve the second hoist. One of them spoke against the location. Dave Mallory was here during that vote. All of the fish buyer tenants knew about this. This is a contractual obligation this board made in 2013, more than a year ago. This board voted to allow 3 captains to install the hoist in the location where it is applied to the Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission requested community input, stakeholder input. No one provided any input until after the Coastal Commission staff recommended approval of the coastal development permit to the commission. They were going to vote on it a month ago. 3 people submitted comments after that. Your general manager saying that you have not approved moving the dock or the environmental aspect of moving the dock. Your council and everybody agrees it's categorically exempt, moving that dock from one location to another from CEQA, from any environmental review. So your general manager submitted comments. Ms. Brennan submitted 4 comments stating that there was some surprise to the tenants, the other fish buying tenants, which is completely false. And finally, one more submission.
Thank you.
I would urge the board not to defer the other items in connection with making the Tiger Grant application.
Okay, Lisa Damrosch.
Hi, okay, so I'll be quick. One, we did request that the next 3 items be taken off of this agenda, and that was not tied to the Tiger Grant specifically, more that those agenda items are tied to each other, and that none of them have had a public process. And I'd like to clarify that by stakeholder involvement, I don't mean this. This is not what we do. This is not stakeholder involvement from the perspective of the commercial fishing fleet. Staying here for 3 hours, listening to you guys bicker, go back and forth on whatever circular conversations you're having. This is commercial fishing. These guys are results-based businesses. And we don't, I don't consider it I know this is a public process, and I appreciate that, and we very much have the rights to come here and speak, and you always listen to us, and we appreciate that. But by stakeholder input, I mean upfront. I mean before something comes to you half-baked, for you to vote on with half-baked information. That's been happening at this level for years. That's why we wrote a letter against the Tiger Grant 2 years ago, 3 years ago, against this Harbor Commission. Getting the Harbor Grant was because there was a 20-page application all about the commercial fishing fleet when no one had ever talked to a single fisherman. That is where this all started. We are now happy to have provided a support letter. This is the 2nd year. That support is very much contingent on the stakeholder input that has been promised, that we have faith in the new staff and in the relationships that we're building with that staff, that will happen. But to say that there's been stakeholder input is not true. And to say that any of the next 3 agenda items that you are voting on have been fully vetted, not true. There are fishermen in this room, none of them have had anything to say about any of it. We haven't had anything to say about HDOC, which is why we didn't specifically speak to the individual issues on that, because there will be an opportunity for us to do that before you make a final decision that affects the fishermen's ability to conduct their businesses. So, next 3 agenda items, I think you guys need to look at as a whole. You need to take off this agenda, you need to send back to staff, tell them to bake it and bring it back in a way that you can make thoughtful decisions. And that doesn't have to be tied to Tiger Grant. Tiger Grant has been applied for. Good luck, Godspeed, and if you get it, we are trusting that you will include us in that process so that when you spend that money, it actually benefits the users of the harbor.
Thank you. Okay, there's a motion and a second on the table, so, if there are no more comments, we're running out of time. I'd like to just go for a roll call right now.
I have another comment, so, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that, I agree with everything that we just heard from the public. I think, Lisa Damrosch is right on. There has not been a public process in developing the application, and I just want to make sure that the staff follows through with their commitment to our stakeholders in the event that we do get the grant, and going forward next year, if we're applying, that we make sure that we have the public process happen in advance of this coming to the board, not after the fact. We need to be working on that process in advance, so that we develop a stronger application. Thank you.
Great, Ed, okay, then roll call, please.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
President Matoush?
Aye.
Great, the motion carries unanimously. Okay, we are at about almost 9:20, and we still have some pretty big items with a lot of public comment.
I move that we extend the meeting till 10 o'clock.
Second.
Roll call?
President Matoush?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Bernardo?
No.
We had one smart commissioner.
Okay, so let's get to item 15, which is the 3 captains hoist relocated impound dock, new and replaced piling. Steve?
Thank you, Vice President Jancarelli. The item before you this evening is to approve the relocation of the work impound dock as shown, the installation of 3 pilings to accommodate the new work impound dock location, the removal of approximately 12 decayed fender piles, repair replacement of 3 fender piles, and installation of a 50-foot counter. Any of the work being done will be subsequent to board approval of the award of construction contracts. Given that under the California Environmental Quality Act, Section 15301 and 15302, the installation of the piles for the repair and replacement, minor alteration of existing facilities are categorically exempt from CEQA. So as a little background, as Mr. Wales stated, the 3 captains originally applied for a hoist location. The hoist was installed, the hoist was removed, and then 3 captains applied for a second location. That was in October of 2016. This commission approved that request, and
Can you give us the vote count on that?
I didn't make note. I believe the minutes are attached to the board package. In late December of 2016, 3 captains applied for a coastal development permit, and over the course of a number of months with requests for further information, eventually the application for coastal development permit made it in front of, onto the agenda for the Coastal Commission in August of this year. During that time, the Coastal Commission had requested, for example, a statement from the district that the board approved the location. We supplied that, and other statements relative to the relocation of the work dock. The location of the work dock, based upon investigation by Assistant Harbor Master John Draper, Director of Ops John Moore, and myself is shown on the top of page 15-4. The piles to install that were included in the CDP application submitted by 3 captains. However, the staff report did make some incorrect statements regarding what this board had approved and not approved, and what we had found and not found regarding the environmental determination. And it was based upon those incorrect statements that staff submitted a letter to the Coastal Commission after their release of their staff report. Subsequent to that, Coastal Commission removed the item from their agenda, and now where we had been intending to let Coastal Commission go first, and then on receipt of CDP, we would move forward with our project. We are now in the position of having you approve these relocations while we, and then it'll go back to the Coastal Commission. In the meantime, however, we have supplied Coastal Commission staff with information about the new piles, for example, and that is included in the Coastal Commission staff report. Driving concrete piles to 30 to 40 feet using small impact hammer. This is information provided to 3 captains by the Harbor District. At the new hoist location, we will need to do some work, some repairing the piles, fender piles, and potentially adding a canal. Additionally, implicit in the, actually explicit in the application from October of 2016 and implicit in the actions taken by this board, staff required Morningstar Fisheries and 3 captains to swap their storage spaces on the pier. This was effected by a letter sent to Morningstar Fisheries in August. Nothing that is before you this evening has got anything to do with the previous district approval for the new location itself. That matter has been decided. What we are simply doing now at Coastal Commission's request is asking you to approve the ancillary actions necessary to, as expeditiously as possible, effect the change requested by 3 captains. That, in order to manage that expeditiously, that could in fact include such items as parking the work or impound dock in the outer harbor while other work is performed. We have already been talking with Cowie on repair of the fender piles. That will be a sleeving project similar to the project that is described in the discussion item 17, which has been delayed by the request for further environmental and regulatory review. While staff has considered options for the impound work dock relocation, this commission may wish to direct staff to find an alternate location that will not require driving piles. We have no suggestion. We believe that the impound or work dock is an important operational feature of the harbor. The board may direct us to not relocate or not replace the work dock. Should that be the case, then any impounded vessels will remain in their berths until disposition, depriving the district of revenue and the public of a berth for use. Again, as I said, we can park the impound dock temporarily on anchor in the outer harbor while we perform the other work to allow for the expeditious placement of the hoist. And there are issues related to how the applications get crafted for this coastal development permits for both the district's work and 3 captains' work, that we will work with 3 captains to manage that as expeditiously as possible. Not included in the staff report is an item that came up very recently that I've already heard through our Director of Ops, John Moore, with the idea that potentially the work dock could in fact remain in its location the reach of the hoist being sufficient to load and offload vessels over that. Of course, if that were confirmed, then the installation of the hoist could proceed pretty much forthwith. I think it's important to note that this is not disconnected from other items out at the end of the pier. I think that some of the other issues that might be raised are probably better raised under item 16. Mr. Wells is here representing Mr. Furtado. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. However, I do think, again, it's important to recognize that the lease explicitly states that Mr. Furtado has a right to set and hoist, and that this board acted in October 2016 to approve this location. Now, after many months of Coastal Commission review, we're asking the board to finalize the ancillary actions necessary to allow for the installation of the hoist.
So I have 5 public comment speakers. I'm going to take public comment first before we have our commissioner discussion. So
Can I ask a
Tyler
clarifying question on the staff report?
If it's
quick.
short, yeah, thanks.
So what I don't understand about the staff report is nowhere in here does it mention that the tenant, Morningstar, has a lease agreement with the district, which clearly states, if you look at Amendment 1, that the tenant has the, Morningstar has the right to the space where this board approved putting another tenant's hoist. And I don't understand why the staff did not inform the board that what they were doing was approving a tenant taking away space from another tenant, which appears to me to be in violation of Amendment 1 and the agreement that they have. Why wasn't the board informed about Amendment 1, and why wasn't that attached so that the board would make a decision with the full deck of information?
The amendment,
Lease amendment.
the lease amendment was attached to the October 16 staff report. The application submitted by 3 captains specifically mentioned the swapping of space between 3 captains and Morningstar, and the lease amendment allows the flexibility of staff to manage the space for the operation of the district, and the lease also requires cooperation amongst tenants.
But
all of those tend to suggest that at no loss to Mr. Mallory or that the 2 storage spaces simply be swapped.
That's not allowed in this agreement.
I've got 6 comments. I'm going to start with public comment number 1. Tyler Butler, please, if he's here.
Well, first off, I just want to state that before coming here tonight, I was unaware of any of the issues at hand with the location of the hoist. I simply came to just share my support with the hoist being in place somewhere on the pier, in consideration that for 7 years I've been selling my product to 3 captains, and that was simply why I'm here tonight. So I've actually learned quite a bit, and I think I need to attend more of these meetings. So
Thank you. Larry Furtado Jr.
Larry Furtado Jr. I'd like to recommend that you guys do approve the amendment to get the ball rolling with the recommendation of redoing the pilings and whatever needs to be done to get it done.
Thanks. George Wells.
I really appreciate Ms. Danroch's comment about no stakeholder input, because I misstated the facts. The Coastal Commission received signatures of more than 40 of your fishermen supporting 3 captains' new hoist location. And based on that, the staff stated in its recommendation for approval of the Coastal Development Permit, installation of the new hoist would upgrade existing commercial fishing operations improve the applicant's efficiency of offloading, and promote continued commercial fishing and associated uses at Johnson Pier. I'll just speak to the last year. A year ago, more than a year ago, you voted, and the vote doesn't matter. I've heard a commissioner say that Mr. Bernardo voted to sell property. This board votes as a board. Once the vote is done, this board has taken action. You made a commitment to 3 captains more than a year ago. Your staff did nothing to carry out your commitment. Your staff told you they had to move a dock as part of the application, and you said, go forward, give 3 captains the new hoist location. They did nothing to move the dock. Indeed, when it came time for the Coastal Commission staff's report, they said, oh no, the commission never approved the dock. Well, if that approval was necessary, staff should have come to this board and said so. Instead, staff is now telling you, we're going to wait until the Coastal Commission approved this before we started any of the work that we told you a year ago we had to do. They have done nothing. In April, I met with your staff, and there was a commitment to make a coastal development permit application for the fender pile replacements that need to be done, or repairs now. And we agreed, 3 captains agreed to take on the 3 fender pile repairs, the dock removal, because your staff asked 3 captains to do that. We did it. And look what happened when the Coastal Commission recommended approval. We got this from the Coastal Commission based on your staff's letter to them, postponed. I sent a letter to this commission a month ago. I asked for 4 simple things for 3 captains. I asked for those things today with 1 change. Your staff has not come to you asking for these 4 things. I asked that you confirm that your October, and this is in your agenda packet, so you can make a motion to this effect. I asked that you confirm that your October 5 approval of the new hoist location included moving the temporary dock. And if it didn't, to approve it tonight. To confirm that moving the dock is categorically exempt from CEQA, as Mr. McGraw told you tonight. Instruct staff to immediately commence any other work necessary to prepare the pile for installation and operation, and instruct staff to ensure that each fish buying tenant's lease contains.
Thank you.
The final thing I'd add is, please, don't allow staff to delay this any longer by coming back to you for construction contracts. As part of your motion, please put in $150,000 authorization, which is what your staff says this is the max, that they be allowed to sign contracts up to $150,000 with a 10% contingency.
Okay.
Because otherwise, you can
Time.
trash.
Thank you, Mr. Wales. Porter McHenry.
Hi, I'm representing Pillar Point Seafood. I wrote a little letter I'll start with. This hoist issue's been a problem for years. Most of it's been through it. I see some new faces, so welcome. I use it, I work out there, I'm probably there as much as anybody. There's just not enough space. It's just an overall bad location for the fishing industry. It's a bottleneck to the other 3 places. It's just a bad spot to begin with. Next issue is with the leases. How can one lease get a whole extra spot, more dock space, when that same leasee already has the most dock space and building space out of all 3? It's just, how can you offer 3 competitive leases with one that's so far advantaged? About the stakeholders, I was not aware of the October 5th meeting last year. It came to me as a surprise. Maybe I did, but I saw with the gentleman's recommendation, and after the last hoist, I thought there was no way it would pass. I guess my fault for not coming in, but I thought the commission stuff would consider the issues a little bit better. And one issue is, how can you guys be offering up to $150,000 for a project for one leaseholder? When you got 2 other leaseholders, you offer nothing, and how can you spend public funds on an issue that is not, no stakeholder input or any input from the public? It's just I can't believe it, That's just misuse of public funds that I see. So I think you guys should just pass on it for now. If they can do it the right way, then we go from there. Thank you.
Lisa Damrosch.
Okay, so I'm gonna take it now. First of all, I would like to make it really clear, excuse me, that any comments regarding this issue are not contrary to 3 captains having a second hoist. There is no problem with 3 captains having a second hoist. It is a right of their lease. They should be able to expand their businesses, as should Morningstar, as should Pillar Point. So in early, I think it was 2014, I know Robert Bernardo was on the board, Sabrina was on the board. The Half Bay Seafood Marketing Association wrote our first letter. I know it was January 15th, I think it was 14. We wrote our first letter about, and we gave our first public comment saying, because we had heard this hoist was coming, and we said, please, God, don't put a hoist on the pier without talking to the fishermen. And you can find the video if you haven't shredded it yet, that Peter Grinnell waved the letter around in the video and said, of course, this is great, we totally want to engage this organization of fishermen and get this input. 2014 of April, a hoist was bolted down. We all know that since then, it's been one thing after another, and the one thing we asked for, the one thing that was waved around in January 2014 was, please don't do anything without engaging the stakeholders, without asking the fishermen who drive forklifts up and down that dock, without asking the fishermen who park their boats there. Yes, 40 fishermen signed a letter. Do you know why? They were just like Tyler Butler. They were asked, do you think 3 captains should have a second hoist? And they said, yeah. And they're like, cool, we'll sign. And I would sign that letter. I do think 3 captains should have a second hoist. But it should be done in a way that is the best use of the space we have, that is safest, and that is most efficient, and that is fair for all the leaseholders and all the users. That's it. And for that reason, I ask that you not move forward with this, take it off the agenda, go back, look at the hoist. It's not that hard. I know we're dumb fishermen, but there's 3 leaseholders, total allowed of 6 hoists. There's X amount of space. And children, sit down with a marker, figure out where should the hoist be, what makes the most sense, what can be done, let's do it. You keep approving things and then going, oh no, now we approved this. The staff report, I'm like, Porter, I didn't even see that was on the agenda. I thought the issue was finally dead. I read the staff report by General Manager McGrath. I thought it was over, and somehow you guys voted to breathe new life. And that's not fair to Larry. It's not fair to anybody, because it wasn't a well thought out decision. And now, once again, we're all here fighting about it. That's it.
James Lee Hahn.
Good evening again to the commission. I just wanted to state for the benefit of the public that the initial motion that was voted on last October was approved by Commissioners Bernardo, Ciancarelli, and Commissioner Paravana, who is no longer on the board. Commissioner Brennan was the only no vote, and Commissioner Matoush abstained because of perceived conflict of interest, so I'm hoping he'll do the same thing tonight. I don't know, he seems like a different Tom this year. Last year he was running for re-election at the time. But I hope he abstains this time if there is a vote. What you heard from the lawyer earlier was that you have a commitment because you voted last year to move forward with this. It seems kind of imprudent for this district to move forward with commitments when they violate lease agreements. I think obviously you should be honoring your commitments, but if they were made in good faith, but if those commitments violate actual contracts, then obviously you can't move forward. This has to stop. Also, I just want to add that, basically the reason why you're here tonight and the reason why this is taking so long is because you are not taking your time with these questions. The majority of the board, including the microphone, is at meetings regularly talking about how one commissioner is holding up things with her questions, with her comments, with her criticism. Again, this commissioner was the only person who voted no on this. You would be avoiding this entire situation right now if you had done your due diligence as well and paid a little more attention and done a little more homework.
You'd just be in a lawsuit, that's all.
And so this is why you need a programmatic approach to Johnson Pier and why you need to approach things as holistically. Doing this piecemeal opens the district up to accusations of partiality. It gives you more headaches. This is not the way you should be doing things. This is the way the district ran a few years ago before we got all this great new staff in. You've got to stop sliding backwards and you've got to do things the right way. I urge you to table this item and the next two items. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna open it up for commissioner discussions really quickly. Do you have something?
Well, I would like to say that this board has had lawyers threaten us in our board meetings with lawsuits before. And the lawyer who did that represented Cartel, which, as everybody here knows, is now in bankruptcy and cost our local surfers an opportunity to surf in last year's Maverick Surf competition. And they've also jeopardized surfers' ability to surf in this year's competition because they so delayed the process of being able to get started with a new organizer. So I take offense to a lawyer coming into our meeting and threatening us the way that you did, sir, with that comment. That is not appreciated. It's not appropriate here. Do not do that again, please. I do have other comments, but I'll let someone else speak first.
Ed?
I was gonna say exactly the same thing. You shouldn't make comments when it's not your turn. The public gave you the opportunity to speak. Threatening a lawsuit is out of place. You shouldn't do it. It's unprofessional.
Robert?
Yeah, again, just very briefly, I remember how I voted last time, and I have not gonna change my vote. I am wondering why this thing is like a zombie, keeps coming back. I thought we were done with this, and I thought that there was a majority vote. So, again, for, I don't know, the third time, I guess, that I'm gonna vote. I mean, I support this, so I hope this thing is done. That's all I'm saying.
I'm surprised at how we voted for this one time. It's up again. Slightly different. This is to go ahead and replace the dock and do different things. It's a different object now because the board approved it one time. How are we going to go against it now? There's a shortage of hoists in the entire harbor, no matter how you look at it. Where can you put another hoist that will satisfy that 1, 2, 3 weeks of crab season when it's absolutely critical? So I would look at this and say whether the board made a mistake, whether they should have reconsidered position in the past. They've taken a stab and said, you can have your hoist here. A group showed up and said they demonstrated why this should happen. It'd be inconsistent now to say that we can't do that. So the concept here is, at some point, we've got to go ahead and move ahead. We don't have our Tiger grant approved. Maybe we can remove all the hoists and relocate them, something in the future. But at the present time, the district has said, we approved a hoist at this location. What are you going to do different now that would change that? It's incongruent to me at this point to say, don't do it, hold it up, do something else. We got crab season coming up. My question is, how soon can you have that up? How soon can this be serving the commercial crabbers in the harbor? Because we absolutely need more hoists. We can't function with the number we had last year. There was unloading problems, there was loading problems, there was lots of problems. Okay, like it or not, we approved something. How can you go back on it now? So please consider your last decision and say, we can change it after the Tiger grant, we can reorganize all the hoists once we've got a new Pier platform. But at the present time, this is where it stands.
Sabrina?
I
have some
Do we have
comments,
another
but I think-
public comment?
Is this for the same item? Yeah, I was gonna address that letter. So this is a letter from, this is public, another public comment from David Mallory. and it's his letter dated to us, this is a letter given to us on this item, and I don't know if, Dave, do you want to read this, or do you want me to
I
read
can
it?
read it, you can read it, someone can read it.
David, why don't you read it?
Sorry, what was that, Steve?
No, if you would like to, as part of your comments, read a letter, there's no problem with that.
Okay.
It's
It's a public
It's not
comment.
necessarily a precedent that you allow the public to have their comments read at these hearings.
Well, but he put out a public comment card, that's why.
And he should.
Yeah.
For 16, not for 15.
No, it says 15 here, and you have one for 16.
Okay, that's, yeah.
And this letter is referring to item 15 on this agenda. David?
This regards my spot, the lease property that was talked about earlier. I have not agreed to allow 3 captains to take possession of Morningstar lease property. The proposed swap of my lease storage space is a violation of the terms of my lease agreement with the Harbor District. So here we are again, a year later, more or less. One entity trying to expand his operation and another trying to protect his. A year ago, in a similar format, all the testimony that was brought, not some, but 100% of the testimony that was given centered around 3 captains' seafood need for a second hoist to help speed up the access for crab fishermen to get their pots in the water at the beginning of the season, which has turned into a mad, frenzied free-for-all. And unloading those pots at the end of the season and assisting any crabber in getting those tall, bulky live tanks on their boat, which are apparently challenging to get through the 3 captains' building. In other words, it was presented as a seasonal affair. But what a difference a year makes. The hoist proposed to alleviate crab congestion at the season's start has morphed into a year-round multi-fishery operation for the purpose of unloading product as well. And included in that is squid unloading. That is not based on fantastical imaginings. It is based on documented letters written by 3 captains' lawyer to the California Coastal Commission. And this is when it all began to change for Morningstar Fisheries. Steve McGrath told Morningstar that we must sacrifice our designated storage space on Johnson Pier. Now, why should Morningstar do this? Why should Morningstar concede space to a competitor for him to come back and use it against him when Mr. Potato of 3 captains was not up front from the start? And so Mr. McGrath, in an effort to appease a majority of the harbor commissioners and Mr. Potato, writes me a letter demanding that Morningstar give up said space so 3 captains' hoists can be installed on my lease space. He reasons that the amendment to the lease under section 9.1, tenant must work with landlord in the event any repairs and maintenance need to be done on the pier.
Great, thank you, Mr. Malaby. We got your letter here. Your time's up.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so that's all the public comment that I have right now. Sabrina, did you have any? I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'll wait for you.
So, I have no dog in this fight. I don't live here. This to me is like this local Hatfield and McCoy's kind of squabble that I'm not familiar with. So the only thing I can go by, I did vote for this, but this is new information to me. And I have very strong feelings and principles about the fact that government should not be in a position where we're unfairly giving one business or another or over another unfair competitive advantages. I don't know what happened, why this letter or these facts were not presented. I don't know what happened. But to me, this is new information. And I'm not saying that that 3 captains shouldn't have 2 hoists. I'm not saying that Morningstar shouldn't have 2 hoists. You know, whatever the lease says is right. But what I am worried about, and I'm not a designer, you know, and I'm not a construction person. I don't really know about pier designs. But I do know that there's something really messed up here. So I think if I look at these 3, I just couldn't even finish reading this because it just seemed all connected to the point where we're disconnected here. It's almost like we are doing things in a piecemeal fashion. But there's got to be some way. You know, I've heard that 3 captains thought that Phillip Point had an unfair advantage. Now I'm hearing Morningstar has from Morningstar that 3 captains has an unfair advantage. I've walked in that area. 6 hoists is a lot. I get that it's going to supposedly enhance business and increase revenues for us. I mean, quite frankly, we want increased revenues. They're our tenants. But my point is that I don't think that government should be in a position where we should be in a position of providing a level playing field. This letter from David Mallory, which kind of stopped me in my tracks, kind of gave me new facts that I didn't even have. I'm not for one of these companies over another. I'm just here. I am for equity for all of our tenants. I don't know what this design is going to look like. I would almost rather give all of this back to the take this back to the drawing board, have the general manager and Mr. Marin and all the stakeholders sit down and figure this out, because this is going on way too long. This has been going on since before I even got on the board. What, 2014? So at least 3 years right now? At least, right? And probably before that. That's the time that we know of. It just seems to me that we should be in a position of providing a level playing field. And right now with new facts, I don't feel like we're doing that, which is, you know, quite frankly, the reason I voted for this in the first place. I didn't think that there was a level playing field. But right now, I don't even know who to believe. And I don't live here, so I'm not in the game. I'm not necessarily in the know. But so I need to go on the facts that I've seen, my philosophy of government providing a level playing field for our businesses. And I think this needs to go back to the drawing board. And you know what? If 3 captains really wants this second hoist, and I think they should have it, then they should want to also make this agreeable with the Harbor District. That's my opinion. Again, I feel like I'm the one person who, you know, is kind of the outsider looking in. So I don't know what we can do right now, Steve Miller, because we've got this thing, but to me, this letter from Dave Mallory, and I've always wondered, well, what is in it for Dave Mallory from the very beginning? I thought there was an agreement. This letter is totally different from what was represented to me in October. I'm not saying that they should not get their 2 hoists. I'm just saying go back to the drawing board and figure out a design that's acceptable to all of the stakeholders here.
So, I don't know, was that a question for me? Or?
Yes, I'm sorry. No,
So
yeah,
the
it's
only
my statement.
answer, the only answer I can give you, in my capacity of trying to help create the legal framework to help you carry out your policies, I don't make policy. When this board acted in October of 2016,
with the limited information we had,
okay, it granted some rights to its tenant. I don't know that you can go back to the drawing board unilaterally without the voluntary participation of your tenants, without there being some, you know, I'm staying in my legal lane, without there being some legal difficulties, given that you have granted rights to one of your tenants, and deciding now to go back to the drawing board could have impacts on that, significant impacts on that tenant's rights.
So I
So,
would
hold
question,
on.
So, you make your policy, but you should do it cognizant of the impacts that might have. And I am also, like Commissioners Brennan and Lorenas, not scared of defending this district from legal action, but I'm also not, and you have wanted to make sure that I advise you should not be unaware that will be a very possible and likely result of taking an action that could be perceived and apparently will be perceived as an infringement of your tenant's rights based on your October action. So that's my answer to your question.
And may I interject and just ask for another motion to extend the meeting to 10:30?
I move that we extend the meeting till 10:30.
Can we do it until 10:15?
10:15? It's your call.
I don't even know if they're, okay.
Is there a
Tom?
motion?
I made a motion, can we get a second?
I would, what, to 10, I'll make a motion to, I don't know, did you
I
make
made
a motion to 10:30?
10:30.
Okay.
I'll second that.
So there's a second. Okay, so can we vote on that? If it could be a no, whatever you.
Commissioner Bernardo?
No.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
No.
Commissioner Matoush?
No.
Commissioner Lorenas?
Yes.
Commissioner Brennan?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to extend it to 10:15. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Bernardo?
No.
Commissioner Brennan?
Yes.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Yes.
Commissioner Lorenas?
Yes.
Commissioner Matoush?
Yes.
Okay. So go on, Steve McGraw.
Incremental.
That was all I had. I was
Okay.
just cognizant of the clock and
Okay.
cognizant of the fact that
We still have
do have
bills
a
and
couple of
claims.
items on consent that we really need approval of
I
specific
get
bills
it.
and claims. If not,
So I have a question for Steve Miller. So Steve, I feel like this whole thing from Morningstar, the letter and the need for, you know, to honor his lease. I mean, really, this letter was that this was such a new thing for me, that without it before, it was a total misrepresentation of what we voted on. That's the problem I'm having with this. Not that three captains shouldn't have two hoists. I just feel like there was a total misrepresentation. And that's why I want this to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, let's have all the three fish buyers go in a room. I don't, you know, if you want to include the Seafood Marketing Association, that's fine. I don't know who the stakeholders are. Y'all do more than I do, or Steve McGraw does. But I really think that this was without this, this was a big misrepresentation to me. Especially since fundamentally I believe that government should provide a level playing field. And right now, this does not do this based on Morningstar's letter. So I don't.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
I would add that either way, we're in a position where there will be a legal argument. One is going to be questioning the current interpretation of the lease agreement, because we have someone who's saying that this interpretation is different from what we're reading. And then we have what you were just talking about. So either way, it's a ginormous mess.
Misrepresentation thing?
Yeah.
There's legal repercussions either direction. I think it comes down to making a decision about, you know, what's fair. And what we know is that there wasn't a stakeholder process. I can tell you because I was there for all of it, and there definitely was no stakeholder process. Unfortunately, at the time, we had a different, you know, staff, and the way the district was run was quite different, and the stakeholders were not brought in, and there was no consideration about how this was going to work in the real world. And I think that's how we got off onto the wrong, we started going off on the wrong direction, and there were favors being done for one fish buyer over other fish buyers, and I could tell you why I think that happened, but I don't think it matters anymore. those commissioners aren't on the board anymore.
Okay, so, Tom, do you have any comments, and Robert, Tom?
I'd like to call for the question, get over this. I would like to further prepare the board for the next motion to table items 16 and 17 to get on with 18, 19, 20, and 21 so that we can go ahead with harbor business that needs to be affected in order to project harbor business.
Right, so I actually would, so you're if you made the motion, Tom, what's your motion, to table, we're not even on item 16.
No, that wasn't the motion.
Yeah, that's not relevant right now.
Okay, so
I said I call for the question.
There's not a motion.
There's no motion.
There's no motion right now. That's why I was a little confused. So I'll make a motion to table item 15 and 16. I mean, I know we're not on those other items. I think they should all go together to be tabled for a further discussion and design discussion with all the stakeholders.
Is that your motion?
Yeah.
I'll
But
second.
can I table 16 and 17 even though we're not there yet?
No.
Yeah, that's the problem. So
The substitute motion would be to handle 15 in an efficient and quick manner.
I don't know, I would have to take a review.
And that's
The
decided.
majority of the board wants to do it, I'm sure it will be okay. I'd have to look at Robert's rules, and if you want to take a recess for me to be able to advise you whether you can table them all at
Well,
once.
could
that's
we
what
have,
have to do.
could we think about it this way, if we're gonna table those items, as a group, that points to the fact that maybe they should have been one agenda item.
together, right.
And that's part of the problem, is that it's sort of like divide and conquer here, and we need to look at this holistically. So I'm not opposed to tabling them all together, because I do think that they're all.
That's my
I think it's a
motion.
great idea.
That's my
All right,
motion.
fine. I can
Is there a
support.
second?
I'll
Do you
second.
second that?
Yes.
I think
Okay.
Ed seconded it.
Okay. President Matoush?
I'm sorry, can you repeat
Aye.
the motion?
That's
I'm
it.
confused. Before
Yes,
we vote.
Motion to table items 15 through 17, 15, 16, 17.
So I made the motion and Ed seconded it, so there's a motion and a second. That doesn't mean that these aren't gonna happen, it's just they're being tabled for design. Okay, roll call.
Okay, President Matoush?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Bernardo?
No.
Okay, so, it's a motion carries 4-1. So that means that we can go with public comments for 16 and 17, although the items from tables we probably can't, right?
Well, I think technically you probably should have taken public comment before you voted to table that.
Well, that's probably true. Okay.
Does anybody want to withdraw their public comment?
I do.
So Lisa, you have public comments for 2.
My public comment was to table it.
16 and 17. Dave Mallory, you have public comment for item 16.
Do you want to withdraw your public comment for later?
Fine by me.
Okay.
George, you have 16 and 17 public comments.
Not withdrawing.
Not?
No.
Okay. Well, we've already made a decision. If you'd like to make your comment, that's fine. Please do.
And what I heard is the decision was premature, so I would urge you to reconsider the decision. In response to Vice President Acting Chair Chancarelli, in the application which you were provided with in my September 17 letter, in the application for September last year to you as one of the commissioners, in response to Mr. Mallory's statement that there was some surprise, Larry Furtado said, we are unable to do unload squid. We have to unload it over Morningstar. So the application, the only product it mentioned was what Mr. Mallory said wasn't mentioned, squid. It refers to loading product, not any particular thing like crab pots. So there was no surprise here. Mr. Mallory attended the October 2016 meeting. If there was anything unfair to him, he would have commented on it. Mr. Mallory made an agreement with 3 captains about the relocation of the space. As Mr. McGraw has told the board, the lease doesn't say, there is nothing in that lease that says you have a right to a particular storage space. Mr. Mallory agreed to
What, do you have a
swap the
written,
spaces.
written
Hold
agreement?
on, Commissioner Brennan, you're out of order.
Do you have a written agreement?
I'm sorry,
I take
continue.
personal umbrage at Commissioner Brennan's and Commissioner Lorena's comment that I threatened this board with a lawsuit.
You
I
did.
did not. I did interrupt, and I apologize to the speaker for interrupting, but he said last year, you voted for this. What I said is, and there would have been a lawsuit had you not voted to give 3 captains its hoist. Now, what happens after this meeting, we'll find out. But last year, there would have been a lawsuit had you refused to give a hoist that had been promised 3.5 years earlier. But I take personal umbrage that you misconstrued my statement to that speaker.
I'm sorry, continue.
There was no surprise here to Mr. Mallory or anyone else. And Pillar Point comes up here, Mr. McHenry, he's the tenant, not Pillar Point. His son comes up here and says, it's so unfair. At the October 2016 board meeting, you asked staff to look into Mr. McHenry's installation of his second hoist 20 years ago, and whether it was ever permitted. And it wasn't. It was never authorized by this board. It was never permitted by the Coastal Commission, I can assure you of that. And he has that extra dock space that his son comes in here and complains to you about being so unfair when you're giving it to 3 captains. That was what the lease amendment that you approved a year ago provided, extra dock space to Mr. McHenry. So there's no unfairness here. Mr. Mallory finally came a year later and asked you for a second hoist.
That's not
He
true.
has the right to
I'm,
that.
you're,
Fact
wait,
check,
stop.
fake news, that is just not true.
You're out of order, Commissioner Brennan. I'm sorry.
He
Your
has the-
time is up, but you also have item 17. Okay.
I'm not gonna take more of your time, but I do urge you, Mr. Miller is absolutely correct. He and I have discussed the legal issues here, and he is aware that I've asked for a government code claim form for Mr. McGraw. So I urge you to consider carefully. I don't threaten lawsuits, but in this case, 3 captains has waited 3.5 years. I'm sorry, 4.5 years since 2013 when this board promised it a second hoist. It's put up a hoist, it's taken down a hoist, it sued this board. It has spent a lot of money for attorney's fees, and this board still has not ensured that its staff gives it what this board gave it the right to last year, the actual location. Thank you.
So Commissioner Ciancarelli, in an abundance of caution, given some of the controversy here, I would suggest that because the Brown Act requires that before you take a vote on anything that you allow for public comment, that you re-vote on the item that you voted on.
Okay, so that's the same motion.
Yes,
Which is-
you now heard 15 and 16. I don't know, you should make sure that there's not public comment for number 17 before
Well, the
you
only
decide to
public
dispense with
comment
that.
for 17 was with Mr. Wales.
And you gave me extra time for it.
Okay, and the others have withdrawn their public comments, so.
Great, so I just think it would be a good idea
To
to
re-vote.
vote
Okay.
just so that
Can
there's
you
no
just-
requirement that you cure any kind of defect.
Okay, so would you please restate the motion, Debbie?
Motion to,
Wait, hold on. Tom, do you understand what's going on right now?
No, I just want to hear the restated motion.
Thank you.
motion to table items 15, 16, and 17.
That was my motion, seconded by Ed.
I second.
Okay. So,
So you're remaking the
any,
motion?
I know that, so.
Okay, I
are
know
there-
I'm asking.
Yeah. So
Okay.
are there any other commissioner comments? And I apologize, Mr. Wells, for going out of order with the public comments, and thank you for your patience. Any other commissioner comments? Okay, let's do a roll call.
Do we use the same motion as before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bernardo?
No.
Commissioner Ciancarelli?
Aye.
President Mateusz?
Yes.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
So Steve McGraw, how do you want to move forward with bringing everyone to the drawing table?
Without another motion to extend, can I recommend that you entertain a motion to approve items 1 4, and 5. And if you do that quickly, we can then spend a couple of minutes talking about next steps regarding item 18, 19, and 20. And 21.
1, 4, and 5. So, item 1 was pulled off by Commissioner Brennan, so.
And
So
I can make
we-
it super quick. I pulled the item just to restate that we really need to get a handle on our legal fees. We're up to $46,388 for the month of August, and that's my only comment.
Any other comments? Okay. Is there a motion to approve item 1?
I move that we approve item 1,
I'll second.
Well, let him read the full motion. Read it.
accept bills and claims in the amount of $403,739.26, including $348,898.73, pre-approved on September 20, 2017, and $54,840.53, approved October 18, 2017, and pre-approved $350,000 in bills and claims until the next meeting date.
Second, is there a second?
I second.
Okay.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
President Matoush?
Aye.
Great. Item 4, Pillar Point Harbor Parking Lot A2, A3 Repair Project, contract number 2017-14, bid acceptance authorization. John.
This is a motion to approve the lowest bid for the Phillip Point.
No, I don't think we need to do the staff report. What we're just trying to do is,
As a
it was
cons-
pulled by
I think
Commissioner Lorenz.
Lorenz,
And
yeah.
if we could just get
I'm
a
sorry, yeah.
question or comment from
I'm s-
Commissioner Lorenz, and then we can take a vote. I'm just
Yeah.
cognizant
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
end of the
thank you,
time.
thank you. So Ed, you pulled off item 4.
I did, I don't think we have enough time to really get into it. My only concern is that this was in the consent agenda, and I feel it really should have been in the discussion agenda, just because of the amount of money you're asking to approve.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is for $156,700, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I agree with Commissioner Lorenz that this should not be on consent, this should be part of the discussion. And
Yeah.
I also want to say that we need to make sure that we put in the concrete things that block people from parking in the coastal
The
trail.
wheel stops. Did we
Wheel
order those?
stops.
We've already ordered those. I'll
Okay.
check on those, Commissioner Brennan, because
Yeah.
staff confirmed that they'd ordered them for me.
Great.
Yeah. That was it.
Okay. Tom?
So do we need
It's
to-
not the position of the board to micromanage the harbor district. The position of the board is to provide overall direction. And if it gets to a point where the micromanaging interferes with the actual operation of the board.
You're micromanaging us,
Hey, you're
Tom.
out of order, Sabrina. Go on.
I'm sick of it.
Go,
I am
Tom.
sick of
Can
the
we get-
chastising. This
Yeah.
is harassment.
So,
Could we get a roll call
yeah,
on that?
actually need a
please?
motion. Roger, are you gonna make the?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay.
President Matoush?
Approve, yes.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Yes.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Okay.
Commissioners, we have
2
2 minutes
minutes.
left.
Yep.
Unless you want to extend again, would you like to go to discussion of commissioner items on the agenda for 2 minutes, or commissioner activity permit and minutes?
Item 5, which is what Ed pulled off.
This is silly that we're trying to do this like this. This is
So
unprofessional.
extend the meeting.
I move that we extend the meeting 15 minutes.
I'll second.
Roll call?
Commissioner Bernardo?
No.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
No.
President Matoush?
No.
Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
So we have
So we're closing the
Meeting over.
2 minutes. So you
We
pulled
don't
off
even have 2
consent.
minutes.
Yes, on my
I think it
phone
just has
clock.
to roll over.
Okay.
We have 1 minute.
Okay,
Amen.
1 minute. Do you want to start this or not?
Would you like to move to adjourn?
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Because you guys want to leave.
Yeah.
So
Make
moved.
a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Robert's made a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
We need 2
Tom?
meetings a month.
Tom? I'll second.
Thank you.
Commissioner,
Roll call?
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
No.
Commissioner Chancarelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenz?
No.
Or President Matoush?
Aye.
The meeting's adjourned at 10:15.